Okay, so we're going to call the special meeting to order of the Board of Education. The first meeting tonight will be for our reorganization. So just to let you all know, to let all board meeting attendees know that this meeting is being live streamed and archived for access at any time by our community members on the internet within 24 to 48 hours of the meeting's conclusion. And if you could rise for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, and roll call.
Mrs. Barber.
Here.
Mrs. Junk.
Here.
Mr. Carey.
Here.
Mr. Lawler.
Here.
Mrs. Pavlak.
Here.
Mr. Rivas.
Here.
Mrs. Witt.
Here. All right, and a quorum is established with 7 members present. All right, and we'll move on to approval of the agenda as amended. If someone would make that motion. Is there a second? Second. And a roll call.
Mrs. Junk.
Aye.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Mr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlak.
Aye.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye. Motion carries 7-0, and we're going to move on to public comments. We do have a regular meeting scheduled very shortly, so you can make public comments now, but if you have a public comment for the regular meeting topic, it can wait as well. Any public comments? Nope. All right, so we'll move on to the announcement of results of the election.
Yes, in your board packet, you'll see document G, which is the official abstract of votes that tabulated the votes from the August 2nd election as verified by John Cunningham, the county clerk. And you will see the number of votes on the back. And one thing that it does say is the county of Kane, but just so that I think most people do know that we do encompass a little bit of DeKalb County, and those votes are also included in there. So DeKalb sends them over to Kane. Kane does the official canvassing and does the abstract, so it comes from Kane County, but it also includes DeKalb County. And so as you see the votes, you see the 3 that were on the ballot and that were elected, but I do want to read the very bottom that from the county clerk, just to verify, it says, John A. Cunningham, Kane County Clerk, do hereby certify that the above is a correct copy of the abstract of votes cast at the consolidated election held in Kane County on April 2nd, 2019. The abstract was made by me, John Cunningham, the County Canvassing Board of Kane County, and now is on official file in my office. So that abstract and going over at the board meeting officially certifies the 2019 election for the Kaneland Board of Education.
Great, so congratulations, Mrs. Witt, Mr. Carey, and Mrs. Junk. So we will do an oath, but first we are going to do our appointment. So I would like to move that Gail Pavlik is sworn in as a member of the Kaneland Community Unit School District 302 Board of Education to serve a 2-year term through the election of a new school board member in April 2021. Is there a second? Second. And a roll call.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Mr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlak.
Do I have to do that?
You can abstain.
Yeah, I'm abstaining.
Oh, for yourself.
Vote.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye.
Mrs. Junk.
Motion carries 6-0-1 for an abstention. So congratulations to you as well.
Thank you.
And so we will rise to do the oath. So anyone who is getting sworn in, I guess.
Yes.
That's the right way to say it. So
Yes.
stand.
in unison?
Yes.
We're going to raise our right hands and read in unison.
Okay.
All right.
I, Gail Pavlak, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of member of the Board of Education of Kaneland School District in accordance with the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of Illinois, and the laws of the State of Illinois to the best of my ability. I further swear that I shall respect taxpayer interests by serving as a faithful protector of the school district's assets. I shall encourage and respect the free expression of opinion by my fellow board members and others who seek a hearing before the board, while respecting the privacy of students and employees. I shall recognize that a board member has no legal authority as an individual and that decisions can be made only by a majority vote at a public board meeting. And I shall abide by majority decisions of the board while retaining the right to seek changes in such decisions through ethical and constructive channels. As part of the Board of Education, I shall accept the responsibility for my role in the equitable and quality education of every student in the school district. I shall foster with the board extensive participation of the community, formulate goals, define outcomes, and set a course for Kaneland. I shall assist in establishing a structure and an environment designed to ensure all students have the opportunity to attain their maximum potential through a sound organizational framework. I shall strive to ensure a continuous assessment of student achievement and all conditions affecting the education of our children in compliance with state law. I shall serve as education's key advocate on behalf of students in our community schools to advance the vision of Kaneland. I shall strive to work together with the district superintendent to lead the school district toward fulfilling the vision of the board was created, fostering excellence for every student in the areas of academic skills, knowledge, citizenship, and personal development.
All right. We're all sworn in.
Welcome. Congratulations. Congratulations.
Congratulations. All right. So, I believe we now adjourn, correct? Is
Yes.
that where I'm at? So we will
Yes.
do the adjourn sine die, where the old board will adjourn and then the new board will kind of be resurrected momentarily. So is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
In a second? Second. And a roll call.
Mr. Lawler. Mrs. Pavlak.
Aye.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye.
Mrs. Junk. Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. Okay, so we will now call to order the new board for the purpose of reorganization. And that will be at wherever we're at, 7:08 PM, and a roll call.
Mrs. Barber.
Here?
Mrs. Junk.
Here.
Mr. Carey.
Here.
Mr. Lawler.
Here.
Mrs. Pavlak.
Aye.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
And Mrs. Witt.
Here. All right, with 7 members present, we do have a quorum. So now we will go on to the reorganization of the board, election of officers. The first thing we need to do is to elect a president pro tem. So I move that Dr. Layden is elected president pro tem. Is there a second?
Second.
And a roll call.
Mrs. Junk.
Aye.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Mr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlak.
Aye.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye. Motion carries 7-0.
Okay, thank you. Would like to, at this point, take any nominations as we reorganize the officers. First one is the nomination for the office of the board president. Are there any nominations to put on the floor?
I nominate Shauna Barber for the office of president.
I second.
We do have a nomination. Is there another nomination? No? Okay, thank you. Mrs. Sturkle, if you roll call, please.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Mr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlak.
Aye.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mrs. Junk.
Motion carries 7-0, so thank you, everybody. So we will-
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes.
So we'll move on to the office of vice president. So we were looking for nominations for the office of vice president. And I will nominate Mr. Carey. If there's a second, I guess I need to
Second.
continue that. And are there any other nominations? So seeing none, we'll do a roll call.
Mr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlak.
Aye.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mrs. Junk. Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. So we will move on to the office of board secretary. Are there any nominations for board secretary?
I would like to nominate Gail,
Good old Gail. And is there a second?
and thank you.
Thank you.
And there's a second. Are there any other nominations? And a roll call.
Mrs. Pavlak.
Aye.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mrs. Junk. Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Mr. Lawler.
Motion carries 7-0, so we'll move on to public comments. We'll do this again momentarily. None? Okay. So now we are going to adjourn our special meeting. So I move that we adjourn our special meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
And a roll call.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye.
Mrs. Junk. Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Mr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlak.
Aye.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye. Motion carries 7-0. All right, so that one is done.
Done.
Do you want to see if those people want to come in?
Oh, are there people out there?
Are they
Please
waiting for
do.
those students?
Yes.
The student recognition piece?
That was probably a good call on their part.
What changed?
Just to
So
not
fast.
have to. Yeah, I think they were just congregating up there. To not feel like our journey actually went from there we go.
You know what's different in this agenda?
And we opened them in
Yeah.
Suspension date.
Who's the sucker that gets the front row?
What's different in this agenda versus the one we had?
They just made it one agenda, so we're not gonna approve the agenda a second time. So we can start it up right now as opposed to waiting until like 7:15 or something.
Oh, okay.
They just made it one.
Okay.
Yeah,
I didn't, yeah.
I didn't either. I was like, oh, sweet, good idea.
All right, so I don't need that. This can all go over here.
How you doing?
Look at all the peoples.
So then, do we do this one again? Is this for the regular meeting? Do we need to do that? Yeah, so we just didn't need to do it for that second one.
Yeah, for the second half of the reorganization. So we do need to approve this one like normal.
Okay. All right, so I think we'll call the meeting to order kind of again. This is the regular meeting of the Board of Education at 7:12 PM. We would like to inform all board member attendees that this meeting is being live streamed and archived for access at any time by our community members on the internet within 24 to 48 hours of the meeting's conclusion, and we will rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we'll do a roll call. Are you ready?
Mrs. Barber.
Here.
Mrs. Junk. Here. Mr. Carey.
Here?
Mr. Lawler. Here. Mrs. Pavlak.
Here.
Mr. Rivas.
Here.
Mrs. Witt.
Here. With 7 members present, we do have a quorum. So would anyone like to move something from consent down to new business? No? Okay, so seeing none, we'll move to approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
And a second? Second. And a roll call.
Mrs. Junk. Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Mr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlak.
Aye.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0, so we'll move on to board and superintendent salutes.
Yep, before Mr. Rollman and Mrs. Maris come up, I do have 2 other topics I'd like to share a note of appreciation and salute. Next week, May 6th through 10th, is Teacher Appreciation Week, with Teacher Appreciation Day being on Tuesday, May 7th. So in advance of Teacher Appreciation, would like to say thank you to our teachers, hardworking, dedicated group, and look forward to hearing and seeing how our different buildings and our parent organizations celebrate our teachers next week. So congratulations to our teachers, and you are appreciated. Second, we do have another salute. Back on April 16th, the Kaneland Foundation met, and as part of a way to continue to support our one-to-one initiative, rolling that out, as part of the meeting, there was a motion to support that rollout with Chromebook covers, to purchase the Chromebook covers for all of the Chromebooks. So the Foundation did meet and did make a motion to approve the covers for 3,000 Chromebook covers at $20 each. So it's a little over a $63,000 donation from the Foundation to the district to cover the Chromebook cover. So at least we can guarantee for the first 3 years the Chromebooks will be in great shape. So that is awesome, and we will have, at some point, we'll bring a couple of those covers with us. And one of the ideas was also, as we're trying to get the foundation a little more well-known and a little more recognition, Jen Hodak right now is putting together a sticker that will go on each of the Chromebooks, and then the cover covers it, but it's clear. So that way there will be now 3,000 stickers roaming around our district, showing off that the foundation made that donation. So that will be another way to highlight. The only drawback is, and it's only a small drawback for a year, the foundation did decide that based on that large donation to forego the teacher grants for 1 year. So instead of those grants that would normally go out in the fall, they decided with covering 3,000 students, that's a different way in which to touch all of our students and address that. So those are the 2 that I had, and with that, obviously we see a great crowd tonight. Mrs. Maris and Mr. Rollman, if you'd like to come up and salute some of our winter sports seasons and athletics and activities.
Wonderful, thank you. This is a very exciting time of year to be at Kaneland High School. We had a successful prom this last weekend despite the snow. It was safe there and back, which was awesome. We've got academic awards, National Honor Society induction, all kinds of things coming up. But we want to spend some time tonight just reflecting on the things that have happened over this past winter. I am honored to bring to you 2 additional students who have been recognized by the state of Illinois as 2019-20 Illinois State Scholars, and they are Brendan Thomas, and I don't think he was able to join us here this evening, but the second one is Will Marshall, who was able to join us. So Will, if you could come up, please, so we could recognize you. Thank you. We'll take your picture out there in just a moment. Thank you. And then we'll be recognizing all of them again at our Senior Honors Awards as well as at graduation. But now I'm going to introduce to you Mr. Dave Rollman to hit all of our winter things.
Thank you very much. Before I get started, I just wanted to share with the board, I really appreciate, as the Athletic and Activities Director, an opportunity to showcase our great students here. I was having a conversation last Friday with one of my fellow athletic directors from our conference, and he was jealous because he does not get the opportunity to go in front of his school board and show off the accomplishments of their students. So I just wanted to share that with you. I thought that was interesting, and I appreciate that. Tonight we're going to cover a gamut of students from athletics to activities. We have obviously a lot of students here and some of the sponsors and so forth, and they're going to share in detail. We're going to start out with boys basketball. Coach Russ Zick, I just wanted to publicly thank him. He stepped in a tough situation last year, helped us out for a year. He is a Hall of Fame coach. He did get his 600th win as a head coach with us. And I wanted to just highlight a few things with the boys basketball program. The freshmen were 10-16, 2-4 in the conference. The sophomores were 22-7, 12-1. They actually won the conference and won 3rd place in the Plano Christmas tournament. And then I also wanted to share a little bit. We had 4 gentlemen: Brett Wallner, Luke Brost, Wyatt Peeler, and Brett David were all captains from this year's team. Will Cushman and Chase Carlson are our top rebounders. Ben Durbala, our team award. Wyatt Peeler was our defensive player of the year, and Bryce Ebert was our offensive player of the year, as well as the overall MVP. I would also like to mention on our boys basketball team, we had 9 of these gentlemen make the academic all-conference team this year, which I think is quite an accomplishment. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Coach Trafton.
Hi, I'm Beth Trefton. I am the head coach of the bowling team. Our season was a good one this year. After a 2-year slump in participation, we more than doubled in size from the previous season with the addition of 7 new members. This year's varsity team included girls from freshman to senior year who were already accomplished bowlers on their own, which led to our being more competitive than in the past. Our GAV team also included all the years throughout the high school, and they worked really hard to become better bowlers, and many will move up to varsity in the upcoming season. We only had 1 senior this year, so we are a young team and can grow. Even more importantly than their skill as bowlers, they worked hard to be a good team. They helped each other with homework, shared slushies for a job well done, hung out when not competing, were kind to other teams, and made friends with students they may not have known otherwise. They were a great group of girls to coach. Our current conference is one of the toughest ones in bowling conferences in the state. 6 of its 12 members took teams or individuals to the state competition. Our team won only 2 of our 12 dual meets this year. However, we should continue to increase this as we grow and move into our new conference. We lose a couple of those more competitive teams. In all 4 of the tournaments that the team competed in this year, we placed at or above half in the final standings, which is a great improvement from the past season. Our goal this year was to never be last, and we weren't. So next year we'll move that up. We placed 7th in the conference meet, 6th at regionals, and the top 5 teams eventually sent members to state. Individually, Jenna Harper, who's a freshman, won the Queen of the Hill Bowl-Off at the Matt Clark Invite. Lexi Vitale, who's a freshman, placed on the all-conference team. At the regional tournament, Shelby Harper, senior, placed 13th. Lexi Vitale placed 11th. And Anastasia Workman who's a junior, placed 8th, which allowed her to move on to the sectional tournament as the top 10 bowlers move on. The sectional tournament was a great experience for both of us. We both now know what it'll take for us to get further into state. Faith Thomas, a junior, had a strong bowling season, had an injured hip, or probably would have gone on to sectionals as well. And she did earn a place on the all-conference academic honors team. Both Jackie Rose and Shelby Harper received honorable mentions on that academics honors as well. We ended our regular season with a staff appreciation bowling night that allowed each of our girls to invite a member of the staff to bowl along with them at practice. And it was a really great fun time, and we will continue that into the future. And we're looking forward to a new season with some seasoned bowlers and our new conference.
I also would add that under Coach Trafton's leadership next year, we're going to be actually hosting our own tournament. Now, many of our tournaments are at our home lanes because several teams use that, but we'll be hosting our own tournament next year. At this time, I'd like to bring up Kelsey Flanagan. She was the assistant coach for the girls' basketball program.
Yeah, as Mr. Rollman said, I'm Kelsey Flanagan, but I brought Hannah Arman along with me to talk about our season, so
Okay.
she'll tell you about it.
Hello, my name is Hannah Arman, and this is my phenomenal coach, Kelsey Flanagan. I'm a senior at Kaneland High School, and I was also captain of the girls' basketball team this past season. We had a good, fun, and successful year together. Academically, every single junior and senior we had was selected to be on the academic all-conference team, which was one of my favorite parts of the year because being a student athlete is very honorable in my opinion. And our record was 19-11, and we won the 2018-19 Ottawa tournament up there. And then we made it to the regional championship game, but unfortunately our season ended there because we lost to undefeated Sandwich. But I'm very proud of what we did over the course of my last year as a Knight, and I can't wait to hear about all the amazing things this program has yet to accomplish.
On to competition and sideline cheer, and coaches Herring and Herring.
Hi guys, I'm Emily Herring. I'm the head coach of your cheer teams, and this is Meredith.
I'm Meredith Herring. I'm the assistant cheer coach.
We had a wonderful year. First of all, we're very grateful to be here. We both went to Kaneland and cheered at Kaneland, so I'm really excited. So thank you for that.
Yes.
Our girls are gonna say a few things, but we just want to point out that in the winter season, our sideline team, we got a lot of new people that didn't participate in the fall, so that was really fun to see interest growing. And we are also working towards getting more, some sort of middle school cheer available, so it's a feeder program into our high school. We're in the medium division for competition, which is outside of the conference, so we just go by school size and compete against schools our size. And it's very, how would you word it? Difficult?
It's competitive.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but anyways, they did amazing this year. It was a transition year for sure, and had some bumps in the road that were, how do you say?
They were difficult for us as a coaching
Unavoidable.
team, but
Unavoidable.
also for the athletes. But we all worked together, and they really took some leadership as the winter season went on, especially some of our seniors who are leaving us. But we couldn't be prouder of the work that both our sideline and our competitive team did this winter. Like Coach Emily said, there were a lot of brand new people on our sideline team this winter, so especially with the weather, we had lots of canceled practices and stuff, but they made huge progress, short amount of time, and really had a lot of confidence to be out there in front of the community. So our comp team is going to share some highlights.
Get out of the way.
Yeah.
So throughout the winter and fall season, our cheer team has continued to cheer on our several sports teams to victories, both on the field as well as on the court. And despite any of the changes or obstacles we went through throughout the year, we were able to work successfully as a team to show off our new skills to our entire community.
We placed second in our first competition at Rockford, so there's a picture on the far
right of us holding our trophy. Left. That's right. Okay. So our right. As well as placing the highest we have in years at the conference competition, placing second while beating a co-ed team.
We reached out to the younger grades to experience what Kaneland Cheer is all about. We ran a middle school clinic along with adding a ACE program to the John Stewart Elementary School. And it allowed us to teach the girls new skills and techniques.
Thank you.
Again, I think it's important to note that this program is continuing to grow. For the last few years, including this year, they practice in the East Gym balcony, which is no longer an adequate space because of the size and the number of students that are participating. So we'll move them over to the auxiliary gym for practice next year. Coach Paoli, come on up.
I just posted that today. You move quick. All right, I'm Coach Paoli. It's my first year as head coach. I've been in the district for 3 years, so I've been assistant coach the 2 years before that. Another transition year, just like with cheer, transitioning to a new head coach, transitioning with a new athletic director. But really goal was for me to have a shift in just the environment of the room, and I think we accomplished that. We did have some, as you can tell, we're a fun group. That's us at prom on Saturday, the wrestlers that showed up. But the goal for me is to grow the program, and I think that's where we'll start seeing some success. I do a lot of character development. I'm big on training them physically, training them mentally, and I think we've done a lot of positive things in the room. We had a lot of younger guys place at a lot of tournaments. Varsity was a rougher year. We had a lot of sophomores, even some freshmen jumping in some weight classes that we couldn't fill. So our future is bright, and I say that a lot. We have a really good sophomore class. We have a really great freshman class. We had our two captains, Noah Butzman and Adalek Isani, both get into the 20-win club, which is something we do in the wrestling room. They're all posted up on the wall. So that was good. We had Noah qualify for sectionals and was 2 matches short of qualifying for state as an individual. We had Cameron Phillips, a freshman, qualify for sectionals at the varsity level, which was pretty impressive. And then wrestling's kind of unique. We have a postseason where we do a frost-soft tournament, and now what's blowing up in Illinois is girls wrestling. So we had 3 female wrestlers, but we had 2 in particular that wrestled in the girls' state series. So for our frost-soft state series, we had 3 sophomores make it to sectionals, and we had 1 sophomore make it to state. That's Miles Ripper there in the Walk of Champions. And he's a sophomore, and he's our heavyweight, and he's got nowhere to go but up. Marissa Vanek, who you see pictured here, qualified for state as well, along with Gabby Giannini. Gabby was a first-year wrestler that had never wrestled before and just wanted to try it out. They both qualified for state. Marissa ended up placing 4th in state at girls' state, which was huge. And Gabby was 1 or 2 matches away herself from placing as well. So kind of a lot going on in the wrestling program. Girls wrestling just got approved by the IHSA as a sport. So I think that's something that in the future, Kaneland, we could see a full committed competitive female team in the future, which would be unique. It's not easy as a male coach having female athletes, but we did all right. So yeah, the future's bright for the wrestling program, and I think the biggest thing is just kind of the shift that we saw in the room this year, and hopefully that continues. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what our younger guys can do in the next couple of years. It's going to be fun to watch. Oh, we also had a lot of people that came out for wrestling for the first time, and that is hard to do in high school because it's not like any other sport where you can just pick up a bat and swing it or anything like that. You have to train, and you're usually going up against people that do that a lot. So we had Cole Valagnota, a junior who's got a background in jiu-jitsu, who's probably the most entertaining wrestler you'll see in the state because he drives referees and other coaches wild because he borderline does illegal moves, but he doesn't actually do illegal moves. We had 4 seniors come out that had never wrestled before, and I think that's a testament to what we're trying to do in the room, but also the leadership that we have in the room. And that's a hard sell, having a senior come out for the first time on the wrestling team in such a demanding physical sport. So we're moving in the right direction. Hopefully we can start getting these kids at a younger age and in the room, and then we're going to see success as a team for sure in the future. Thank you for your time.
Before we move away from the athletic arena and into the activities and clubs and so forth, there were a couple other pieces that I wanted to personally thank publicly. Our night crew used to be the Rowdies, and it's now the night crew. They do a tremendous job of supporting our athletes. I picked this picture in particular because as I was looking through some of the pictures, one thing that I've noticed about Kaneland in my short time here is how many of our student athletes, how many of our music students and band students, et cetera, they all support each other. Almost every one of these students is active in some other sport, and they were all there for a girls' basketball game that night. I see that on a regular basis. Our softball team, those games typically are shorter than the baseball games, and there'll be 8 or 9 girls that'll walk over and watch the end of the baseball game. So I think that is, I think that's something we should take pride in here at Kaneland because it's really something that our students take on their own. It's not something that we actually have to teach them or talk to them about. This was the second of 3 National Letter of Intent signing days. This just gives you a kind of a brief overview of what kind of crowd we're getting for this. We've had over a dozen students sign for various levels to play at the next level. And one of the things that we're going to do, probably won't happen until the fall, but we're really pushing to do this, is to expand our signing days to include music students, choir students, performing arts, whatever it is. But we're getting really good turnouts, and we kind of played with the idea of moving our signing days to different times, but our athletes really insisted that they be right after school so they could participate and they wouldn't miss out on those. So I just wanted to share that with you as well. Moving on, Ms. Grish, if you would come up and talk about Educators Rising.
I would like to introduce 2 of our fantastic seniors, Kristen Lane and Jay Fox, and they're going to talk to you about Educator Rising versus me.
So this is our fabulous sponsor, Ms. Grish. And our club this year has almost tripled in size. We now have 21 members when we used to have 9. Just kidding, 9. So Educators Rising has had several great opportunities, bonding and also educational. We have 2 partnerships, one with Northern Illinois University's Educators Academy, as well as Aurora University. And throughout those partnerships, we have gone to several different presentations, events, and have had several great guest speakers come in and talk to us about different things education related. We also have gone to the Kaneland Elementary Schools and participated in the Read for the Record, where we read to kindergarten through 2nd grade, and we read to 527 students in all.
Excellent. Some of our winter highlights is we had our Helping with the Young Knights, where the registering kindergartners came in and a bunch of our students went in and we just kind of sat with them while they registered and we did the activities with them and we enjoyed that with them. And then we had, for the winter holidays, we decorated all the office doors for all the office staff and administration there. And then we have our Ed Rising just kind of get together where we sat down and we had ice cream and a movie. We watched Mr. Holland's Opus. I said that right? Okay. Got to double check because I'm a horrible reader myself. So We also helped participate in the spelling bee. We had about 6 volunteers there, including myself. The adults decided to make me the dream crusher, which I thought was not appetizing. But some of our spring highlights were the Ed Rising Partner Breakfast. We would like to thank Dr. Layden and Mrs. Osliger for taking time out of their busy schedule to come join us there. Thank you very much. We greatly appreciate it. We had an excellent guest speaker. The Teacher of the Year came, and we learned some new things, saw some excellent teaching moments that students from other schools shared, because this is not just us that partners with AU, it's 13 separate high schools. So we all get very different views that come in, and it's just a really good experience. We are currently working on Teacher Appreciation Week. We got some fun things planned for the teachers. Wink, wink. And our year will be coming to an end with a senior send-off and banquet.
Good, thank you.
Ms. Giles?
Hi, I'm Rachel Giles. I'm the theater director at the high school, and these are 3 of our students who participated in the musical, and they're going to talk about it.
So my name is Daniel Massa, and I played the role of King Arthur. This year's spring musical was Monty Python's Spamalot. Roughly 1,000 members of the community came out to see this hilarious adaptation of Monty Python and the Holy Grail. A lot of us,
You go.
so a lot of us really had a fun experience. We got to know each other, and a lot of us came out of our comfort zones, and it was just overall just a really fun experience. And a lot of us are excited for next year's production.
You find out in May.
Hi, my name is Ainsley Kintz, and I played Patsy. 5 of our cast members, Danny Massa, Leo Espinosa, Rob Ludke, myself, and Evie Beck, were Best Acting candidates for the Illinois High School Musical Theater Awards presented by Broadway in Chicago. And our whole production was a candidate for several awards for choreography, production, and scenic design. Only 75 high schools in the state of Illinois were selected to compete for this. The theater family is something really unique, and we all had an amazing time just bonding, and it's somewhere we can all just let loose, because theater kids are a little out there. So we find ourselves being able to trust each other, and it was a lot of fun.
Just a last thing, my name's Brendan. I'm a senior, and I played Not Dead Fred in Spamalot. I just wanted to say that I'm very happy that I had the opportunity to participate in theater, because there's not a lot of places that I find that I fit in quite right, and this opportunity I do feel at home getting the opportunity to, because I'm a singer, and I really do enjoy dancing, although I haven't not been particularly good at it in the past. I am glad that I've had somewhere that I can express what it is that I'm good at, because those skills don't get integrated in other places, and I'm glad to have had the opportunity. It's just
At this time, I'd like to bring up Mr. Puckett, who is going to talk about a couple of different organizations.
Hello, I'm Mr. Puckett, and I'm the band director at the high school. And a couple of years ago, we started a group called the Winter Percussion Group. There's some other teachers that come in that we hire through different ways and means. One of them works with us in marching season, and then they go on and they do this. They've started this Winter Percussion Group, and they've done really well. And I'll let these 2 guys tell you about what they did this year.
Great. Say your name first. Hello. I'm Jack Overstreet. So I'm here representing the Kaneland Winter Percussion Group. So the group's been around for 3 full seasons now, but this last season was the first time we actually competed against other groups. So we had 2 major competitions. We did the Indiana Percussive Association, and went to their regional, and then the Chicagoland Winter Guard International Regional. When we were at the Chicagoland Regional, we placed 2nd in our class, which is a huge improvement for a performing group that's only been around for 3 years. So I'm really proud of all the progress that we've made as a group. Our season is not very long. We only go from January to March, which is not a very long time to learn this entire show and then perform it in front of people. but through a lot of hard work every single season, we definitely put on a good show, and I'm really proud of everything that we've done.
And then Mr. Kunzman will talk about the choir portion, but we took basically almost the entire music department to Florida over spring break. It was 4 buses of fun all the way down, and we could tell you lots of stories, but I won't. The band participated in Festival Disney, which is an adjudicated festival, and did really well. All the groups of the band groups got the excellent rating. The wind ensemble was one of the highest ranking instrumental groups of the day. And then the marching band participated in a parade in Magic Kingdom. And we've done this parade several times, and it really is a fantastic event where you get to see, obviously all the Disney stuff, but seeing the marching knights walking down Main Street, it's really a cool experience, and I'm really proud of all the students and all the work that they put in to get there. There was tremendous community support along the way. We really appreciate all that, and it was an excellent trip overall, and so we thank you. Did you want to say anything about the trip?
Well, honestly, I come from a low-income family, so I would never really get the chance to go to Florida and see this or experience this. So band has been my way through that. So not only did I get to go my 2 years, but I got to go this year with my sister. And she will be going her senior or junior year, depending on how it adds up. And it's a really good experience just to be able to go and experience this with friends and overall just relax and have a good time. So.
So, show and tell if you guys want to. Two Mackies. So, I have 2 students with me that you've already seen, Brendan Neese, a senior, and Ainsley Kintz, a junior. They are members in concert choir as well as our chamber choir, Madrigals. In February, we had a chance, we were one of 6 schools that were invited to perform at U of I, the inaugural Illinois Sings Invitational. The other schools invited were Elk Grove, Glenbard East, Union High School, the charter school right there at U of I, Washington High School, us of course, and then drawing a blank, but what other high school from across state? So the doctors that they have there, 3 of them worked with us, Dr. Snow, and we had a chance to really have a wonderful day working with the directors, and it was really cool to interact with the students. They got a chance to work with the University of Illinois Black Chorus and sing some really cool things and integrate with the conductor from that, and then singing with all the other schools performing, and also getting a chance to perform for them and get feedback from each of the directors from there. So that was really cool. In Festival Disney, the groups did an amazing job, but before the students let you know a little bit about that, I want to invite you all. We have 2 upcoming events. May 15th is our spring choral concert. It would be awesome to see you there. We have each of the choirs performing as well as some senior solos, and then on the 20th, there's going to be a Hall of Fame induction for a former Kaneland student, and as well as our senior recital and senior awards. So if you're around, we'd love to have community members, board, anybody that's able to be there. We'd love to see you. But without further ado, I'll turn it over to Ainsley and to Brendan.
Okay. So for our Disney performances, the Kaneland choirs performed in Festival Disney on March 29th. At the festival, our 3 choirs, that is the concert choir, Madrigals, and Bella Voce, performed in front of 3 highly respected collegiate-level choral directors. Each choir performed 3 selections for the clinicians. They were then evaluated based on national choral standards. The scores were compared with the other participating choirs from across the country. Following the performances, each choir had a chance to work with one of the 3 clinicians. This year's clinicians were Dr. Jerry Blackstone from Michigan University, who is a Grammy Award-winning choral director, Dr. Hugh Floyd from Furman University, and Dr. John Sinclair from Rollins College.
Concert choir, Bella Voce, and Madrigals each received a superior rating and averaged over 95 points out of a possible 100. The Madrigal Ensemble was the highest scoring group in the festival and received an average score of 98 out of 100. Additionally, Concert Choir received the Silver Award for being the second highest scoring group in the Concert Choir category, missing first place by 0.3 of a point. The Magical Singers received the Gold Award in Best in Class for being the highest scoring ensemble in the specialty choir category. And Senior Dallin Huang received the Outstanding Vocal Soloist Award. We went there to inspire, not to impress. That's our motto. And one of the most touching moments was on the bus ride back after performing, when we were about to load in and head out. Some of the, what were they? They were just...
There's a lot of staff members that help put together Festival Disney, and they work closely with all the choirs as they're coming and going. And so at some point they have an opportunity to interact, they listen, and they have an opportunity to... They normally would just kind of move you along and say, thank you so much for being here, but...
The staff members came onto the bus and they told us that they were so inspired by what we did and that their hearts were touched. I think one of them almost cried. Not important, but that was a really big moment for all of us because that's our goal as musicians, to inspire, not to impress.
Thank you.
Mr. Bruno was not able to be here. He said he's missed so many nights with his kids recently he wasn't able to come, but he said he would come back. I did want to show a picture. We did have some students recently perform at the state journalism competition, and they did receive medals and place in various categories, so I wanted to recognize them as well tonight. Coach Thorgeson and our bass fishing team, they're kind of in between seasons. They're not a winter sport, but they're not a spring sport. They're kind of in between there, and they're getting ready to fish at the sectional meet down in Salmonock. Real quick here. And then Mr. Boyle on the far left, he has been here recently and talked about the DECA students, but I just wanted to highlight Jacob here and Mr. Boyle are actually down in Florida right now. They weren't able to be here because Jacob has reached and is performing in the nationals for the category of personal finance literacy. So he's at the national level performing. And then last but not least, we're going to go back to athletics. But of course, as Mr. Puckett talked about, the percussion group uses this facility and obviously our physical education classes. But this was this was the regional championship game for the girls basketball that night. And I just wanted to show you this picture because of all the efforts of Mark Payton and his crew, the board. We appreciate, of course, our donors, Mr. and Mrs. Hendrickson, but this is the finished product of all the long work that has gone into the renovation of our East Gym, and I just wanted to share that with you as well. So again, thank you students and coaches and sponsors for being here. I think it's really important that the board hears and the public hears directly from you because I thought you said it way better than I could have ever said it. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's trophies.
Oh, you want it back?
You can make sure you grab those.
Congrats.
Congratulations. Thanks for bringing them.
Now you need some of the pictures.
A lot of work went into that, huh?
Yeah.
Nice, thank you.
What? I know.
My bag.
It's from right here. We have great bookends at home.
Great in my Disney snack.
Pictures?
Were you guys part of the student recognition? We don't want to miss you because it looks like you made a good effort to come out tonight. Okay.
Athletics, yeah. Oh, the bowling team. Go get the picture.
Yeah,
let's go get the picture.
they already presented and they're taking a group picture right now.
Yeah,
thank you.
congratulations. Yeah.
Oh. Thank you for making the effort to come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, girls.
And then generally when they're done, they exit from there, they don't come back in. So if you're with them, you can
You're
feel free to go.
more than welcome.
Yeah, you can come back. Please stay.
All right, so any other salutes?
No.
Nope. I think we're good. Okay, so we'll move on to public comment. Do we have any public comments tonight? So we'll move on to the consent agenda. Consent agenda. Tonight's consent agenda consists of the following action items: the approval of accounts payable and payroll April 2019, approval of minutes of the April 8th, 2019 regular meeting, approval of resignations of employment of staff, approval of special education workload plan, approval of policies from press, second reading, approval of lease for Chromebooks, approval of revised fees for the rentals of Kaneland schools and grounds, approval of bid, Harder Middle School tennis court and outside course replacement, as well as the following informational items: the student suspension data report, the 2018 final tax extension report, and the field trip notification. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
And a second? Second. And a roll call.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Mr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlak.
Aye.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Mrs. Farber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
And Mrs. Jung.
Motion carries 7-0. We'll move on to new business. J1, handbook updates.
Yep, Dr. Mumm and Mr. Rice are here for the next two new business items, J1 and J2. For the first one, the handbook annually comes to the Board of Education for review and then back at the second meeting for the consent agenda. So there's usually a lot that goes into it, and it's usually an enormous production like you'll see with the curriculum maps also. So Dr. Mumm and Mr. Rice are going to share some of the highlights and see what questions you might have for review before it comes back to the board on consent.
Definitely. And I know there's a lot of new faces tonight with all the turnover, so we'll try to go slow. As Dr. Layden shared, the process for this is it's basically all year long. We've got our deans at the middle and high school and our assistant principals at elementary working with staff, working with students, and trying to come up with things that need to be changed. If you remember last year, we really started looking at some of our dress code pieces, and so obviously looking at that and then making sure that was working and how we see those things through continued on. Outside of that, though, this was really a year of making sure our handbooks aligned with press policy and board policy. As you know, better than I do, you guys spent a lot of time looking at some of the press policy updates that came through. So then it's kind of incumbent upon us to go through our handbooks and make sure all those things match. So one of the biggest pieces of this year was really just aligning that language. And then every year there's typically something that has evolved over the years that just is slightly different. So for example, at the high school, there's different number of parking places. So they want to update that in the language, or the periods that the finals happen. They want to update that in the book as well. So as you look through the memo that we prepared for you, the majority of those things come again back to aligning language, looking for grammatical errors, making sure that everything that's in that handbook matches with current policy. I think one of the ones we can kind of highlight is based on that work we did last year with the student dress code and really trying to give students more ways to empower themselves and more ways to express themselves. They are going to pilot at the high school next year, allowing students to wear hats. That was a big conversation with that group and with Josh West and the handbook committee that he has there, and realizing there's probably bigger battles to fight with students than necessarily talking about that, knowing that Kaneland High School doesn't have some of the issues that other schools may have that prompted that piece of dress code, wanting to see what would happen if we went a year without that. So like Dr. Layden said, what we wanted to do was to give you at least a little kind of teaser as to what you'll see next meeting, but then also give you a chance to give some feedback as well. And we've worked through the school level committees. We did bring this to CAC for some input back a few months ago. And if there's any questions or thoughts that you have, this is definitely still in the process of being finalized. So one of our goals tonight is if you have questions, comments, things you want us to look at it as we review these things, just kind of take notes on that and bring it back to our teams at the building level.
So any discussion?
Mm-hmm.
This may be silly. So there's, wearing hats, I think it's great. I understand why we would move toward allowing it.
Yep.
But there are hats,
Yes.
baseball caps, and there are hats, cowboy hats.
Right.
Cowboy hats could conceal
Sure.
items that,
Mm-hmm. I think that's I'm going to write that note down. Because one of the things they're not, if I pull out the actual language, and you'll see it next time, it's not just hats, it's head coverings, because we also want to be respectful of religious views and things like that. But then there will also be some language in there about, even if students are wearing hats, needing to face a certain direction, or what's allowable and what's not, what can be on that hat. It obviously can't be disruptive to the educational environment and things like that. So I would assume that if I was sitting in front of Dr. Mom in my class and I had a big cowboy hat on, that might disrupt the environment. So that's one of the things we'll probably need to put some language in, and then watch as the year goes on to make sure, as we're trying to let students express themselves and have that, ownership in what they're wearing, where do we draw that line? That's one of the things we'll have to kind of keep an eye on over the year.
And then I know,
my generation, you know, I think we were the last generation that was kind of like the whole hats off in the house rule. And I don't know, you might need to inform some staff members that they don't need to be enforcing that or picking that battle.
That's definitely part of the conversation that we've had, so,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, thanks.
Good point.
So what if somebody decides to wear a Mexican hat?
That's fine. Well, you mean a big hat? I don't know. I would think that's where we're going to have to talk about the disrespect, or not disrespect, but the disruptive of the environment. And is it for a cause that is appropriate, or are they just doing it to wear a massive hat and disrupt everything? So we know we'll have some challenges as next year goes on. And just like anything, we need to make sure that we monitor it and take feedback and see what needs to be tweaked along the way. So.
All right, thank you.
Great, thank you. Dr. Mum is going to kick off the next piece. Well, I guess you have to actually get there.
Sounds good. So J2, the curriculum maps?
J2, ready?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Every year, we come to you with our curriculum review process. We have our binder of maps that they have been working on. Usually at this time each year, we preview with the staff what is up for a curriculum review. Then they research, they begin to draft ideas, they start to really create their units of studies starting in the summer, and then they take that work all the way through March. Not only do we ask them to first and foremost always create the curriculum maps first, we want them to look at the standards, we want them to create from the global standards they're given specific student I can statements, and then essential questions and activities and key learnings that need to go into that unit. Once they have their units of study done, we do vet them with each other, early childhood through 12th grade. So we do pull the whole group together, and we have every grade span look at a different grade span and give that feedback from someone who doesn't teach the course but understands the content area. What progression questions do you have? What clarifying questions do you have? And those tend to be our best critical friend groups. The teams then go back to their grade spans, they draft their maps, and then they finalize them. They do submit them to us for final review, and then they are printed for all of you for approval, and then also in that binder. And then July 1st, we do post them on the Kaneland website for the community to see any changes. Throughout that process then, once the units are done, we then start looking at tools and resources. We are not a district that uses the tools as the curriculum. The curriculum is the units of study, and we look for tools that can accommodate how do we deliver that curriculum unit of study. And sometimes it's a lot of tools, sometimes it's difficult to find a tool that fits the way that we've written our map, and so we have to try some different things or pull from multiple resources and tools. This year, a couple of the key changes that Mike and I highlighted for you. I'll go over the K-5 ones real quick, and then Mike will give you some highlights from the 6-12. K-5 for the last 20 years has taught reading and writing separately. They obviously have had some connection, but they've been in separate blocks in their content area. And so we did ask the staff from this point forward to really blend them into one ELA block. And so that took a lot of conversation, a lot of mentoring from the 6-12, because that's how 6-12 has always done it. And how do we really make sure that what we're doing and having the conversations and writing complement the reading and vice versa? And so the units now for K-5 will all be posted as ELA, or English Language Arts. It won't be a reading map and a writing map. It'll be one tool that's combined together. Through that process, we have looked at tools that might meet our writing needs, but not necessarily our reading needs. And so we have found a writing program that we previously have had, the Lucy Calkins curriculum, that does meet our goals and I can statements within writing. But the reading pieces, we're still investigating about 3 different ones: Fontes and Pinnell, Lucy Calkins, and then Houghton Mifflin. We didn't feel like we were at that point where we could make a very valid decision on exactly the perfect reading tool that complements the writing in our units. And so we are going to try those 3 over the course of next fall, and then come back and make the final decision on the reading tool that best meets that ELA map. What we found through the elementary review of tools, many times vendors are writing vendors or they're reading vendors, but to blend them together is a little bit more difficult for some of the elementary tools. And so we want to take a little bit longer on that. We're excited to blend them together. We're excited to start that process of really integrating them together. And the professional development will be focused on how do we make sure it's an ELA block and not just two squished blocks next to each other. Mike?
One of the things Dr. Mum didn't mention necessarily is that this is the first time in a few years that we haven't had new standards driving our adoption. So when you think about our science adoption or our social studies adoption, new standards were coming in, and the teams really had to go to the drawing board and break those standards down and turn that into what they were going to teach. We were, I would say, lucky in that our teams right now, they've been working with the Common Core state standards for years, and this gave them a chance to really deep dive into them. So at the middle school level, I think one of the pieces that's difficult for that team to do is to have vertical articulation amongst their teams. So not only do they take the time to look at it 6th, 7th, and 8th grade as well, then also to begin those conversations about how does our curriculum flow together, and how are we making sure that our students are leaving 6th and going to 7th prepared, and what does that look like? Really started to break down everything they're teaching, and our focus last year, if you remember way back to our SIT plan with proficiency-based progress, was really hammering home that idea of I can statements and how we're giving feedback to students, and they did an excellent job. We have a lot of them sitting right here right now. They did an excellent job really trying to get down to that level, and what do those expectations on a daily level look like for our students, and how are we giving them that feedback? And I know they also had a lot of conversations around vocabulary instruction, what vocabulary instruction looks like to them, and if you can imagine, in the English world, there's a lot of dissenting opinions on not only vocabulary, but the other hot topic, which is grammar. And how do we get about that? How do we teach it? And how do we make it so that it sticks for students? One of the, I think, perennial challenges for any ELA teacher is that every year you almost seem to have to start from scratch with grammar and then add a little bit more, and then start from scratch and add a little bit more. So wanting to figure out a way that would integrate that into some of the things that they were doing and really make it stick for them. So that's kind of where they are right now. This work continues through the summer and even into next year. Now that we've got the foundation of what we expect students to learn and what we expect them to be able to, excuse me, to do, now the assessment writing begins, and really the search in earnest for resources to support that for our 6-12 teams will begin. The story is very similar for our high school team. Again, they did not have new standards. Their in-house systems are a little bit more equipped to handle vertical articulation, so they had done a little bit more with that. And what they really focused on was how do they group those I can statements into really meaningful chunks, so that when they give feedback to students, the student can actually act on that and think of things like writers' workshops and think of things like thematic units that they can really work with students at a deep level. So these are the 6 or 7 things we're going to work on in here, and here's how they all blend together. One thing that I'm pretty excited about with our, and not that I'm not excited about all of this, but one thing that I think is pretty unique about how our high school staff tackled this is they wanted to create some different opportunities for our seniors. So our senior level English has traditionally been a composition and literature course, but they wanted to create pathways for students that kind of depending on where they're going. So that composition class now has 3 different elements that it could be. They all cover the same skills, but students can pursue a creative writing pathway, an advanced academic writing pathway, or a writing for careers pathway. So depending on kind of what their future holds, they can take a focus area there, and though the content is different, the skills are the same, and maybe just how they apply those are a bit different. And then they're looking at doing a genre study for the literature side, so that students would have an opportunity, for example, if you're a fantasy nerd like me and you want to spend your entire time reading fantasy novels but still looking at the skills that you need to analyze literature, you might be able to do that. Or a mystery genre, or a Western, or whatever those genres may be, and trying to roll that out and see some of where are those students interested. It's not entirely personalized, but it's definitely a step in the direction of giving students more choice in what they learn. The other piece that doesn't necessarily hit with K-5 are at the 6-12 level. We also have world languages. They were kind of in a unique boat because, as you remember, I believe it was about 5 years ago now, they actually moved and we now offer world languages at the middle school. So they didn't necessarily have to begin with the curriculum work that Sarah talked about, we asked all of our other staff to do. They had done some of that when they decided to bring that down to the middle school. So they were able to jump into the resource evaluation a little bit more quickly. So they have finalized kind of a few resources they would like to look at. I'll be bringing those to you guys for review pretty soon. They're now in the process of seeing how do all of these things that they've rewritten and their units and targets line up with this new resource, and then evaluating programmatically what does that flow look like. So from 6 all the way up through 12, how do we want to make sure that our students have access to all these things? So it's, what is that, 10 minutes that we just talked for a year's worth of work. As you guys know, the time that they put into this is insane, and we have amazing teachers that care a lot about what they do. And sometimes even when those those discussions get a little impassioned, it's because they all believe in what they're doing, and they want to make sure they're doing it the right way. So that's our very top level, and no doubt you may have some more specific questions, so that's why Sarah and I are here. If you have any questions and you don't want to read through the entire booklet on your own, feel free to ask, and we'll help you with what we can.
questions?
I'll go first if you want. Go
Okay.
ahead. All right, I guess I got a bigger Broadview question.
Yes.
This is all of the curriculum that we're offering through the schools.
Yes.
Why are we not voting to approve or disapprove this? Because it's later on, I'm just off on this time schedule.
Yes, it will come back to you. So what we typically have tried to do, I'm sorry for interrupting, but what we would
No,
typically
please.
would try to do is bring it to you now, give you some time to review it because it is pretty big, show you the highlights tonight, and then if there's further questions that you have, we'll come back and answer those for you. Otherwise, it'll come back for you guys in the next agenda to actually approve.
Okay.
Yes. Good question.
I didn't have time to read the 100 and some page down.
No doubt.
Is French still in there?
French is still there, yes.
Why?
Well, because we still have some students that are in that pipeline. What we've talked about doing, though, is and this is likely something you'll see, don't think I'm tipping my hand too much, in next year's course handbook, is doing a 1 and 2 section. We perennially see that students at the high school, we have enough people to fill that 1 and 2, but we don't want, and they're interested in that, what we don't want them to do is to believe then they have that option for 3 and 4 moving on. And so wanting to make sure we honor the students that are in the pipeline now, but then as we move forward, giving them still that option. A lot of schools still have a 2-year language requirement or a 2-year, they look favorably on that. And so we feel like that choice is still sustainable, just maybe not all the way through the 4th.
All right, let me rephrase.
Yeah.
Why French? It's not even the top 10 languages in the country. Why are we not, or I'm sorry, in the world, why are we not offering something that's more widely spoken?
That's true. I think that's a piece we would want to survey our students on, and right now we haven't heard the demand for it. Maybe we need to seek it out a little bit more and see if there is a demand.
I would go the other way around, wouldn't you?
As far as us telling them?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we may. We could also survey our community members. I think the point of that is I don't want to make that decision for them. I think we would need more input, whether it's students, whether it's you, whether it's community. What do we need in this area to help our students out?
Well, this shouldn't come as a surprise that I was going to bring this up tonight. I think that French should go away and be replaced with one of the more commonly spoken languages in the world.
Okay.
Teresa? I'm
You
done.
want me
I'm
to
sorry.
speak to that?
No. I'm sorry.
Because I really-
I'm done. You had questions, feel free, I'm sorry.
It's a valid point, and we'll take it for review, for sure.
Yeah, I do think that's a valid point. I have a question, a K-5 question for Dr. Mo. So historically speaking, in assessments, writing underperforms, and I'm not just at Kaneland, but it seems like everywhere, and some of it they say it's because of the subjectiveness of the scoring and things like that. So, we've tried, different things, and I'm wondering if putting the two things together is in response to some data or best practices that you have found that perhaps will bring up those writing scores.
For sure. I think there is 2 big pieces that really made that decision more apparent, and that definitely is one of the reasons. When they talk about writing, when it is so isolated, you begin to see the students' interest in a writing genre, but they don't understand why they've written as a purpose for someone else to read, when you have disconnected it from reading. And so when they're knowing, not only am I writing in this genre area, but for the intent of an audience and a reader, and I can be that reader, then the writing scores do tend to strengthen and get closer to where they are as a reader. And they feel that connectedness, and so they kind of pull each other up when they have them blended together. I think the other thing that we found in researching and working with a lot of the personalized learning districts that have been personalizing for quite some time is it really comes down to the ability of teachers to give feedback. And typically, when you have been elementary certified or trained, you have heavy reading courses that you've taken and a writing course. And so our feedback independently in writing conferences probably is not something that the staff has been as trained in as reading conferences, guided reading, those types of things. So when you take them and put them into ELA together, that conferencing improves because not only are you giving kind of that reading feedback, but the writing is within that conference as well. And so it tends to be a little bit more tailored and improved and personalized writing responses within that ELA conferencing. And so that'll be a huge part of the PD as well. We've done guided reading conference PD, but we need to really make sure that they understand how do I give good, accurate feedback per the I can statements in writing just as much as reading, and emphasize you're writing for the intention of reading. instead of you're writing for the intention of narrative or expository. And so it's a little bit different, and absolutely we hope to see an impact in. We have started to see an impact already by using a specific, more rigorous writing rubric. We're just in the norming meetings right now, and the first couple norming meetings that have been concluded at the end of last week had already made some pretty decent gains within their comparison to last year, but we're hoping with that combination of ELA, we'll continue to see that.
Okay, and I probably should say, instead of talking about assessments, I should probably talk about meeting proficiency and
Yep.
and update my language.
Absolutely.
It's not all about the score. But thanks.
It's all about the score and the feedback towards that score.
So I don't know if this is in the same purview as this, so stop me, but is there discussion or thought about moving language even further down, right? So we move from high school to 6-8, are we looking at doing it K-5 at some point?
Sure. I think the initial, I can't speak to the K-5, but I think the initial, we're actually meeting with some folks from the exploratory wheel at Harder, and Brian Faulkner, the principal there, and myself, about what does that wheel look like and what's the future of that wheel. Next week, we have that meeting. I think having implemented Spanish the way we did, we probably have some lessons that we can learn. I know I've been asked by the board in the past about students that may want to take that in a more exploratory fashion. We don't have a course that's dedicated to that for them right now. So I think even, at least from my perspective, and I could be completely off base, before we even push it further lower, wanting to make sure that we broaden that kind of exposure to truly being an exploring of the language as opposed to jumping right in to, yep, I want to take Spanish 1 and I'm a 7th grader. So I think what we're currently looking at is how do we create that kind of taste that we do for so many of our other fields? How do we do something like that for languages as well? And I think that would be an ideal place to bring in exposure to other languages, for example. This is a concept I hear quite often. If you're going to do an exploratory version of a language course, typically it doesn't always focus on only one language. So that's something we're looking at. No promises right now. This is something we're just now in the brainstorming kind of place, but that's definitely something on our horizon. I don't know if that.
When we did the exploratory review, gosh, it was 2 years ago or 3 years ago already, and we researched and met with our other local districts as well as some that are out of county, they were actually making some shifts away from the language at the elementary level or doing it in more of a multi-language exposure class rather than, again, one specific language. What did come up higher on the research was more the critical thinking skills and the STEM-related skills that really focused more on the workplace, building the start of a foundation towards a workplace skill and getting into the CTE connection, and that's why we chose to go to the critical thinking exploratory at that time. It's always a question when we come up on our review cycle to our exploratory offerings. It's usually one of our first questions. Let's go out, let's research, let's kind of see where that trend and connection was, and really the workplace skills was just a little bit higher ranked than having exposure to the languages at that time.
Is there thought of piloting it, maybe at one of the elementaries, and then seeing if it's...
That's a difficult, yeah.
How did the critical thinking, did that pilot and then go to all the others? Or just
It went to all.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, because you truly, we want to make sure a Kaneland education is a Kaneland education, and so we didn't want to pilot completely different curriculum for any one location, because we want to know, they can pilot different materials, but we want to know that they've all gone through the exposure of the same units of study, no matter what material. And so we haven't. I think it could be a conversation we look at in the future.
I would think it would be one that would be useful for sure. I mean, from my perspective. I mean, you know, you hear this all the time that, you know, you take Spanish in high school, but you're really taking a kindergarten class as a 14-year-old, right? Like, because you're learning your colors and your numbers and your letters, and it's kind of crazy. Like, why don't we learn it when you learn it all the way, right? Like, once you learn it when you're younger, it makes more sense to maybe overlap those. So maybe not just Spanish, like you said, maybe a multi-language
Right,
one. You
and
know.
almost like Mike's idea, that wheel of exposure to many. And acquisition, you're exactly right. Language acquisition is easier up until about 10 years old.
Right.
And then it starts to get harder as you progress, so it makes sense.
Yeah.
It's also kind of interesting that, I mean, recently done daycare searches, right, and in almost every place we looked, they're teaching Spanish to 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, but then we stop. And we don't pick it up again until 8th, 9th, 10th grade. I mean, I have no idea what would be the point of doing it here and not contingently.
Sure.
I think more districts that we researched during the exploratory review really shifted away as an exploratory, but looked at the possibility of offering open enrollment for dual language. And that really was where the exposure to another language was coming, either dual language, and it was Spanish, or some of our schools that we researched were doing dual language offerings at the elementary as Mandarin. And so it wasn't an exploratory, you were learning, you know, your core, your English and math, but in a dual language setting, versus shifting their exploratory offerings into language acquisition, because then it was relational learning of the language, not kind of the color number.
Right.
And so that, maybe dual language is also something to further explore as we continue to look.
And I was going to share, I didn't know if we would get to that, but I would posit that this board will be considering the idea of a bilingual program within the next 5 years. Once you hit 20 students at a single location that speak the same language, you're mandated by law to offer a bilingual program for those students. And I would think that at that time, we may want to consider, as Kaneland, do we have some sort of open enrollment there, and what might that look like? So that's in the future. We've been on that bubble probably since I've been in the seat, so for the last 3 years, and we haven't crossed that threshold. And as you know, we're not expecting a ton of growth, but you never really know what's coming in. And so we're in the high teens right now, and I think it's Stewart, right? So at John Stewart Elementary right now. If John Stewart crosses that 20 number, we'll have to give one for our Spanish-speaking students there. But then it will be up to us, do we open that up for other students by application or whatnot? So just a little something to put in the back of your mind and think about a little bit.
I guess my question would be, what's the hesitation? I appreciate it, but what's the hesitation? I appreciate you saying, oh, we're looking into it, but why not look into it a little bit more aggressively? Why wait so long? You said 5 years, that seems like a long time.
Oh, I was only meaning by law.
Yeah, and Mike, I'm not calling you out, I'm just saying, you know, yeah.
It's a great question. I think that what we have tried to do is take our resources within the Ed Service Department and link them to the goals of our strategic plan.
Okay.
And it just hasn't been one of the goals that has been brought up in our past plan.
Okay.
Maybe going into a new one, it emerges. And so our resources and our staffing and our professional development has really focused more on the learning continuum, personalized learning in any content area than looking specifically at that.
Sure. Not a critique, just ideas, yeah.
And some of that right now is, as Dr. Mum just shared, some of it's just capacity.
Yeah.
It's the capacity and how and where would we start and what would that look like as a complete rollout in FTE and experience.
Sure, sure.
I think too, just a piece for, as we ever talk about course changes and things that we're offering, I have a high school brain. It's where I was raised in, it's where I come from. I'm very used to offering up a plethora of classes, and some of them aren't going to run because students won't want them. But as you get younger with students, when you have a middle school model, for example, that's not necessarily how you do things. You want you want to make sure that there's certain experiences had by every student, and then that's held even more dear at the K-5 level. So we want to control, here's what we know we can create and use as a foundation, and then let that grow. And so that's an excellent question, and it's one we've talked about at the middle school, along with probably 6 or 7 other different kind of subject areas. But the more you put out there, the less able you are to establish a foundation. And the question becomes, well, when do you really start letting students make that choice? You know, when do you say, yep, it's yours to choose, and we've given you that strong enough foundation, and now you can pick? And when do you say, no, we really want to make sure we expose you to all of these things, music, art, band, all of those things right now are in that pool, and each one that you add to them becomes more difficult to ensure all students have had that exposure. So that's another piece that just, the logistics of it get difficult. So when you take all these things together, it's definitely not something we don't want to do, but sometimes figuring that out, solving that puzzle can be difficult. Not impossible, but difficult.
Fair answers, thank you.
Anything else?
I bristle a little bit when I hear about and I know this isn't our philosophy necessarily, when you talk about STEM and the training as it relates to careers, when you're talking K-5, I mean, really, it should be about education for education's sake and critical thinking across the board. And I know we do more than just teach kids how to use Excel and Word and, you know, how to give a good PowerPoint presentation. I know we're doing a lot more, you know. At the gallery walk, I saw a lot of evidence of that. But it just seems absurd to me that would be the reason, you know, that people would be saying we need to teach STEM at an early age.
I think maybe I misspoke.
Okay.
It links to career tech ed through the workplace skills, which are collaboration, critical thinking, communication. Those skills are fostered for college bound, for career bound, for community bound. It's just called the workplace skills within that CTE realm that it's linked to. And so it's not that we're trying to focus them in on learn this critical thinking content so that you can go to work. It's learn this critical thinking
I was listening
content
to it and I thought,
so you can apply it anywhere. Yeah.
So we're
It's like
training
partnership,
first graders.
teamwork. No. It's just the technical workplace skills is the way. It's like a national standard almost. That's the name of them. It's not, those are skills that apply to daily life of working together and collaborating with everyone, not just the workplace. That just happens to be their title.
Somebody on the national level needs to rename that.
And they tried with the four
Technology
C's of the
skills or
21st
something, I don't know.
century, but that didn't stick as well as workplace.
Okay, well, like I said, I know we're doing a lot more. So.
Okay, anything else? All right, thank you guys.
Thank you.
So we'll move to J3, health insurance renewal recommendation.
Annually in the spring, after the insurance committee meets, Dr. Fuchs brings, on behalf of that committee, a recommendation, a presentation to the board. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Fuchs and let you share that information. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Everybody who just left is going to miss some really good news pretty soon.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Sneak preview. So, first of all, I wanted to just hit some highlights in the memo for the health insurance renewal. Our health insurance plan is self-insured, so we have a health insurance committee that monitors claims and progress and fees and costs. We have a broker that we've worked with for many years, and he helps to bring that information to us, along with a wealth of knowledge on federal legislation and all the rules and things that go with that. So in the memo, the dependent update is first. As you can see, we've remained fairly consistent. We've added 2 new employees, and we've, along the way, taken away 3 dependents year over year from April to April. So that's really stable at this point. The next page is the KEBTF fund. These funds are kept separate. Each pay period, the district and the employees pay their health insurance premiums to the fund, and then within the fund, the claims are paid and the fees are paid. So the fund stands alone. It's reported separately on the treasurer's report. It has its own page. Currently, the fund is very healthy. Best practice suggests for a self-insured plan that you have 3 to 4 months worth of claims on hand to help with high months and low months, kind of the waves. Our current claims average around $600,000 per month. 3 months would be 1.8 million. 4 months would be 2.4 million. Our current balance is just a little over 2.4 million. At this time, the Health Insurance Committee is watching that. We monitor the fund balance at every monthly meeting. And at this time, there are no recommendations for the board to take action, but just to watch it. At some point, if it happened to grow higher than that, the recommendation might come back to you for something like a premium holiday or something like that. But right now, we're just going to recommend keep an eye on it. With regard to the renewal information, we had a pre-renewal in February where we thought it was going to be about a 5% increase. However, we had a couple really good months. Those months worth of data went into the actual renewal. The pre-renewal was done by Hub, who is our broker. The actual renewal is done by Blue Cross Blue Shield, who is our insurance carrier. With that, a portion of the renewal, about 12%, are our fixed costs, and about 86% or 88% are claims. Because we've had really good claims in the past couple months, in a few minutes I'll get down to it, but our renewal is what we would consider to be flat. Industry average right now is between 8 and 12%, so our committee could not be happier with this renewal. With the renewal, it would add about $34,000 to the district's portion, but that's if we have the claims that they say that we're going to have. Right now, we are running at 95% of what was projected at last year at this time at this year. So that's.
Say that one
Yep.
more time.
So
Please.
last year this time, they gave us a projection. We're running at 95% of that.
Okay.
And so that's why our renewal can be flat, is because we've done a very good job managing that. Which is interesting, because while we've done a very good job this year with our claims, in a minute, the next section is on stop loss, and that's a different conversation. So let me finish, let's see. So in the renewal then, the flat, in our financial projections, I've used 5%, which is what, we typically use. Because it came back flat, we've got about another $360,000 of, it was projected for, and it's not now targeted for. So that's good. That's very positive. With the next section, then, the stop loss carrier, we switched to Optum 2 years ago. 2 years ago, when we switched to them, that first year, we did not have a stop loss claim. Our stop loss amount is $145,000, which means we didn't have any claims 2 years ago that went above $145,000 for an individual. With Optum, they gave us a bonus because we didn't. So they gave us back, I think it was $67,000. This year, with our stop loss, we've had 3 claims over $145,000. So now they're taking a pretty good hit on us. So with that being said, they raised their fee quite a bit. So that's why you're going to see in the recommendation that we're going to recommend going back to Blue Cross Blue Shield. They came in at a lower percentage of an increase. And so our broker, Hub, went out to market. They got, it was 3 different stop-loss carriers with their numbers, and Blue Cross Blue Shield is what the insurance committee is recommending for a change. That's something that has changed very easily. It doesn't affect members. What it does do is when you hit the stop loss, then that carrier takes over for Blue Cross Blue Shield, and then they start paying claims, and Blue Cross Blue Shield does not. So, Ryan?
So we're self-insured up until 150,000.
145?
All right, so we pay the first 145,000, then we
buy
basically
extra insurance.
We reinsure the remainder of. Is there a cap on the reinsurance?
Not if there's not. So that's, yes, there's not.
Okay. So we got quotes for stop loss from 3 different companies. What was the price discrepancies in the quotes?
Sure. They were a little bit less, but they also, both of the other companies had, it's called lasering in there. And that means that if you switch and the stop loss carrier sees that you have one person with a really high claim, they will laser that person and make their stop loss called $500,000. So then our plan would have to pay up to that. So we didn't want lasering.
I'm surprised it's legal with all the changes in the insurance laws. No, I don't doubt that. You're right.
Right.
Just extemporaneous comments. Sorry.
Yep, not a problem. So that's why the committee wanted to go with Blue Cross. When we switched to Optum, we came from Blue Cross, and then we went to Optum. So we felt most comfortable with the pricing and the features of that plan to protect our trust fund.
Right. When you say pricing, how much is the price?
Just a minute. I brought it with. The stop loss for Blue Cross Blue Shield will be the total annual premium, around $700,678.
760, close enough.
678, around that. Because
Close
it'll
enough.
fluctuate once the board approves it, then they finalize the numbers based on that current month's enrollment, and then it shifts based on,
Okay.
Yep.
No, I wasn't looking to hold
Yep.
you to the penny, I just.
nope, about 700,000. Currently, we're paying about 517,000. So, of the fixed. But our dental came back with, a negative or a savings, so it's offsetting the costs of some of these increases. And then also, Blue Cross Blue Shield came back with, a savings as well for our network, or our medical, access. So there's a savings there. So there's a bunch of different fixed costs that go into it,
Okay.
that come into how we got the flat. That is just a part of the 12% fixed. So that's why we are recommending the stop loss carrier. Then if you'll go to page 3, the tier structure, because we have stabilized our numbers and they're not fluctuating much, our tier multipliers have also stayed the same this year as they have for the past 4 years. So when we started with the tiers, before we had 4 tiers, we only had 2, single and family. The tiers have no impact on the cost of the premiums for the entire cost. What the tiers do is it divides that total cost 4 ways instead of 2. So it reorganizes who pays what. And so you can see the various multipliers that are provided by Blue Cross Blue Shield for the tiers. And then you can see the different changes. Our 4 tiers are single, employee plus spouse, employee plus children, and then family, and then the total and the different changes. So our recommendation then is to approve the overall increase of about 0.5%, change the stop loss carrier to Blue Cross Blue Shield, and keep the premium amounts the same as in 2018 as in 2019, 2020.
Any other discussion, questions?
I have a question.
Whoops, and then also I put the rates on the back for you. Yep.
So this is good news, I mean.
Yeah.
it's great
Thank
news.
you, we're very happy.
But so I have a question, and it involves a little bit of a hypothetical. And I've brought this up before. So let's say it wasn't as good news as it is, and you bring this to us, and we have had, to this point, really no involvement, 0 involvement from the board on what the committee looked into. What is our procedure, what is the procedure? Like, would we vote this down and then say, sorry, go back to the drawing board? Because I would assume that's not the best way, because there are probably deadlines and things like that in order to get people covered, to have continuation of coverage. So I'm wanting to know when the board, okay, so when I look at it, what I struggle with the most and what makes me the most frustrated is in years when we need to make cuts, we have never had the committee come back and say, because you need to cut $1.5 million, dollars, we recommend that either we go with this other carrier that has fewer benefits, or that employees should take on a greater share of the premiums. And I think the board should have the opportunity to direct that. I think that should be a management right. And we really only have one person in the room, Gail, that isn't covered by the insurance. And it just seems that we don't have any input, and then we don't have any representation, except for one person in a group of, a room full of other people. And I certainly wouldn't want to put it all in Gail to take all of our frustrations and everything there. I want to know how we can have more input, the timing of it in the year, the procedure that we would follow, and, anything else you would need for us to do in order, would it need to be before the committee meets and say, okay, our financial projections are showing we're going to have a loss. Okay, insurance committee, you need to reduce cost for the district by X%. And then we've given that to the committee, and they can do it however they want to do it. But to me, it feels like the biggest place where we have no control over making changes. So I'm just wondering what the procedure needs to be.
So we have changed our benefits in the past. The most recent change was 3 or 4 years ago. That's about the time when we were cutting, and we did receive a little bit larger projected increase. So the Health Insurance Committee recognized that we needed to do something because we couldn't handle, or we didn't want to handle, those types of increases. So that change, if I remember correctly, that year, we increased deductibles both for the single and the family. And then by doing so, those savings then were brought to this board for approval. And Gail was there for that because she's been on the committee for as long as I can remember. Additionally, we've changed out-of-pocket maximums. I think that was the same year as the deductible, because that year we made 3 benefit changes because that, again, the renewal came back kind of high. So and the committee regularly looks for opportunities for savings throughout the years. For example, the board, I don't remember what year, but around 2014-ish, asked us to look at HMOs. You asked us to look at cooperatives, and we looked at all of those, and we came back and reported to the board on those findings. And so the Health Insurance Committee would be glad to do that work on behalf of the board with our broker who we employ, or not employ, but pay contract, and to do those things. So we have a history of either maintaining our renewals and premiums and working with the board to reduce benefits when it's necessary.
With the last round of cuts, there were no changes to.
You're right.
And we struggled finding those cuts. And it's not more, I'm not accusing the committee of not doing enough.
Yep.
I am saying that there may be a time when the board wants more, even though maybe they cut 10% and we're like, but we want 20. And, it would be our right to ask that. I'm wondering what the procedure is and where and how we do that, because there isn't any way, because you guys meet, you bring us the recommendation, and we vote on it. And, this is great. It's only a 0.5% increase. But what if we had wanted to have a 10% decrease?
To get away from your hypothetical, to go to a specific example.
Sure, please.
I've asked in the past why we don't shop brokers. I've gotten answers. I still think that we had the same guy for years. We pay him tens of thousands of dollars. That's something that should be shopped. It hasn't been, and I understand that I can't tell you to do that tonight and have it done for when this needs to be done. But how do I?
That's what I meant, but procedure.
How do I, as a board member, or get the group, say, do this? And I think, is that kind of where you're trying to go?
It's just, there's no clear path. We would almost have, because a lot of times it comes back and we're told, well, but we budgeted 5% and it's less than that, as if then it's okay. Well, maybe we don't want.
I want it.
Maybe, and I'm not saying we do this year. I think this is fine.
I'm saying I want to see competitive bids from a broker next year. How do we put that into place? I mean, the board may not agree with me, that's my opinion, but if we were to, which, I mean, from my personal experience, if I shop brokers, my prices go down. So Hub has had the same piece of business for, who knows, I don't know.
And with the stop loss thing too, I would have liked to have seen what all the bids were. And because in a similar situation that wasn't so, I mean, I know there was a reason and you give us the reason, but I mean, maybe the committee doesn't think it's a valid reason, but we would. And I don't mean in this particular case. I just mean in some other situation, say, well, the committee looked at it and they decided that they don't like that because it reduces benefits. Well, maybe we would consider reducing benefits based on cost and what the overall big picture of the district's financials are at the time.
So is that something that procedurally the board needs to decide as well, how to interject at a different time of year, or?
Yep, so let me answer a few of the questions and and then let you continue with the discussion. With regard to the broker, at any point that the board wants us to shop around, that would just take the board to
Consensus.
direct us to do that.
Anytime.
And I'm gonna interrupt you just to say, is that January 1st, is it November 12th, when is the question?
I would think for a broker like that, you would probably want to direct me early in the school year because the process, as you know, takes some time because it would be considered a service like your lawyer, like your architect and your auditors. And it's better if you do that earlier in the school year because that broker then would need to provide this renewal information. That's the timing piece that I'm worried about for us, Teresa. We have a July 1 renewal each year. And so the renewal information, actually, this is one of the earlier times that I've brought the renewal. Typically, it comes either the first or second week in May. First or second board meeting in May. And then you're right, there's not a lot of time to do anything. This year, we were fortunate to get the information at the end of April, and it truly does depend on Blue Cross Blue Shield when they can give it up, no matter how hard the broker pushes. They always wait for the most current claim data, because the more current it is, the better accurate their projections can be. And so this time it was to our benefit, because we've had a couple good months the past couple months. So that really shifted the conversation. So I feel good about that. But timing-wise, for the renewal, it's always going to be a quick turnaround each year. That isn't something that I can control. But what we can do is, I do usually, if we have it by the first meeting in May, and the board wants to do something different, the committee can't meet again. But you could come back that second meeting in May to vote. The challenge is that we have to be ready to go for the changes for payroll June 15th because we pay our premiums 1 month in advance. So
wouldn't it make more sense than to have some kind of a deadline where at a previous meeting before the committee meets, that the board comes up with a list of topics that they would like the committee to consider, the way we do sometimes for FAC and CAC. I know it's a different kind of committee. It's made up of staff and stuff, but that to me makes more sense. Like if we have, if we'd like to see a new broker, if we'd like to, and I know it's not a popular thing to say, but if we wanted to say, we'd like you to look at, really high deductible things because if we're getting a lot of retirements and we're having a lot of young people come in, young people sometimes like those higher deductible things. And I know we've looked at it before and it comes back as like, well, people on the committee didn't want that. Well, of course they don't want that. But I just feel like we don't have the input to direct. And so I would like it to be like you would say, okay, like say you come in August 31st or our last meeting in August or whatever, and you say, okay, we're gonna, we need recommendations for, by the next meeting for anything you want to see from the insurance
Is that-
committee, and then we would give it to them, and then they would.
Is that maybe something that we need to do, is just put it on the August agenda that this is what we want? I mean, we have
or
other
whatever
reoccurring
agenda
topics.
needs to be there.
Right.
That's what I'm saying, yeah,
Well,
it needs to
then-
just.
Well, and the other thing I was thinking too is it's almost like, and the numbers can't be accurate, and that's what makes it kind of problematic to have conversations in like January or February, because what we do with a lot of other topics, like this one, they bring it forward, if there's questions, the board can think about it and then go back again. It would almost be coming up or creating a timeline of the initial, what are the board's thoughts, what are the questions, and then maybe an update somewhere in the middle, so even though those could change with a stop loss or a couple catastrophic claims, but it's almost like a midpoint check-in of, this is where we are, this is what's going on. Based on that, does the board want to give the insurance committee any direction to think about or consider? Is that what you're kind of saying? Like,
Yeah.
So,
And I know it won't, I mean, the
No,
first
we're not-
couple of times, I think it might be, we want you to look at something radically different. Because it just doesn't seem like those ideas get to the committee
Yep.
for consideration.
So a couple points based on what your comments. One is, a perfect example, is I had the pre-renewal in February and could have brought it at that time with the pre-renewal information. At that time, we were looking at a 5% increase, but then when the renewal came,
I have a technical question to interrupt,
Yeah.
so I don't mean to cut you off, but you had a renewal meeting in February, but that.
pre-renewal,
Pre-renewal, but at that point, you had already gone to your broker and said, he shopped it to who at that point? Just one company? Did he go?
are you talking about the whole health?
Yeah.
That he didn't shop, it was only the stop loss carrier.
Okay, so if we said, all right, and I might be,
So like
I'm getting in the
United
weeds here.
Healthcare
If I said I wanted you to go to, I'm blanking on,
Sure.
Travelers Insurance.
Sure.
And I want you to get a price from them to do everything. When do I have to tell you to do that by?
That would be in January.
But don't they need more time, because your pre-renewal meeting was in February, they're not gonna get it done in a
The
month.
pre-renewal is from Hub's financial analyst.
All
They
right,
don't,
Back up a step yet.
okay,
Let's say, start at square one, forget Hub and the whole kit and caboodle. When is that date? I want you to do it all. I want to shop, I want a new quote for everything.
Beginning of school year. you
I
said
would need
August.
it, yeah, I'll need to check on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
not surprised you didn't have the,
Yeah, I think
Because-
we're talking the first of the school year.
Yeah.
Going forward.
I don't want to tell you a date and then
I'm not trying to
broker
pin you
tell-
down on just generally fall, early fall.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
So it sounds like what you guys are saying is you want more of a process. We would like quotes from 3 providers this year, not necessarily a reaction to a fee number, like that you might want a process. Insert yourself in the process without whether, you don't need to know it's going to be a 5%, 0%.
So 2 other comments though that I wanted to make sure that I was touch on. With regard to that high deductible, there was actually data to suggest that our group wouldn't benefit from that.
Financially or medically?
Financially,
Okay.
because of self-selective. If you implemented a high deductible plan, there's data that shows if you give people choices, the healthy people will go to the high deductible plan, thus raising the costs for your PPO plan. So we did the analysis, we saw the data, and that's why that recommendation came back from the committee. So I just wanted to at least touch on that at that time. Perhaps we need to redo it, Teresa. The market has changed, times have changed, but that definitely could be a recommendation from the board in the fall to have the health insurance committee study that again. Not a problem.
But then I think the numbers need to come back to us, not
the recommendation?
Not just the recommendation, because, so
We wanna
what,
see the-
what could happen is, okay, so we could have this higher deductible plan, and while it doesn't benefit us all of us, because the costs go way up for the PPO plan, well, maybe we want to raise the cost to the premiums for people taking the PPO plan and try to get them into the high deductible plan. I know these things sound cutthroat, and I don't mean them to, but these are the things that corporations do all the time in considering health insurance questions and costs.
Sure. So I agree with the August timeline. If there are things like that, let's get that on an August agenda. The other thing that I would say is a part of this conversation should probably be reserved for a different conversation. I believe it might be a closed session topic, because the reason why we have a health insurance committee is because it's mandated through the contract. And I think we would want Maureen to help us navigate that if we're planning to make some changes with how that works.
Yes, and we can, I know we have negotiations on
That's right.
the agenda, the closed session topics today, so we can at least.
And these would be something that are subject to that also.
But definitely we
Some
can
of it is, some of it is,
add August and talk about the things that the board wants, because we can definitely do that. And that's probably the time that I would recommend in terms of making sure it gets done properly throughout the year. In preparation for that spring renewal timeline where we have to hit payroll and things like that.
Okay.
So, thank
Thank you.
Yep, you bet.
Anything else?
Good.
So then I will make the motion that the Kaneland Board of Education approve the health insurance renewal rates as presented with an overall increase of 0.5%, change the stop loss carry to Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois, and keep the premium amounts the same for 2019-20 as last year. Is there a second? Mr. Meg? Mrs. Jones? And a roll call.
Mr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlik.
Aye.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mrs. Junk. Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. We'll move on to J4, review of the public bidding process.
Great. Thank you for that conversation. I appreciate it. And Shauna, thanks for changing the vote, because I think I had the years backwards in the original thing, so.
Well, then you probably can thank Beth, because I read.
Thank you.
But I'll take credit for it. Thank you.
There you go. Thank you.
Just as this topic that we just covered, there were some feedback wanted, more information generated. This one, J4, the review of the public bidding process, was a topic that came from the board either last meeting or previous meeting as a topic for the future agenda. So as a result of that, we put this information together and want Dr. Fuchs to be able to review it and then see what questions that you have.
Sure, thank you. As the board had asked, I brought to you some data. The purpose of this agenda item is for discussion. If the board would like additional data, I would be happy to gather that and provide that for you. But for tonight, what I brought to you is the school code, the requirements for the public bidding, the procedures that we use to do public bids. And then lastly, we put together a chart for the last 3 fiscal years, or 4, actually 5 fiscal years, in terms of how many packets did we send out and how many bids did we get. So let me just kind of skip through a couple things. The law requires us to place an ad in the newspaper, and so we always do that. Ours goes in the Elburn Herald, which is printed on Thursdays. The law does not require us to send out the packets to particular vendors, but it is best practice to do so. We keep a list, an ongoing list, and so say, for example, we get an email or a phone call from a particular vendor, they know, they just call the school district or they email and they say, please add me to the list for snow removal. So then we keep that list, we add them to snow removal. The next time we bid snow removal, we make sure they get a packet. The vendors know that that's how the process works, basically. Sometimes, depending on the project or service, we may have a mandatory pre-bid meeting. The purpose of mandatory pre-bid meetings would be so that the vendors can come in and see a facility, look at the scope of the work or have a better understanding so that when they bid, everybody is bidding on a known issue, product, service, things like that. Other times, we don't have mandatory pre-bids. For example, if we've done it, copy paper, we don't have a mandatory pre-bid. We get plenty of bids for that, and every year is just a little bit different. So depending on the service or the product, we handle it just slightly different. Let's see, what else do I want to, then the bids are received, they're closed, they're sealed, they get opened in public. Sometimes the vendors come to the bid opening, sometimes they don't. And we always have the bid opening according to the law where I'm there, I read them aloud, and then we announce the apparent low bidder, but we always tell them at that time, we're going to check on references and verify that the bids are totaled properly and that there's no misgivings. At that time, then I'll also announce to them when I anticipate that that would be presented to the board for approval. And then say, for example, you awarded a bid tonight for the tennis courts. Tomorrow morning, we'll be in touch with the vendor. Your bid was approved. Do you need a purchase order? Do we have a contract? How do we, just depends on what service or what product it is. We'll determine then how that's handled. With that being said, I'll let the board have that discussion on what they were hoping to get from this conversation.
Start with you.
Sure, since I was the one that was kind of harping on this, I thank you for getting this together, and I'm going to pick on fuel, the bid fuel, because I heard from Dr. Layden that there was, 10 people got packets or were given packets, but only one person chose to bid on, or one company, I should say, chose to bid. But there was a discussion about whether or not, because we're only doing a one-year contract, whether or not we own fuel tanks. It was some people. It's not that I think that the bid process itself is flawed. It's something needs to change so that we get more than one person to bid on a fuel contract. So I don't know if we need to step back further and look at, do we go buy our own fuel tank so we can accept more bids from more people? Do we look at long-term contracts? What do we need to change overall so that that one becomes at least 3? Like snow removal, I'm sorry, wrong line item. Security services, we 8 packets, only 2 bidders. It's not that by the time that the packets go out, it's too late, I guess, for lack of a better word. We need to increase from 1 to several, and I don't know how to do that because I don't have enough information. Yeah, the way that we do bids is uniform and standard, and all government bodies do it the same way, but it's also what we choose to write in the bid that decides whether 9 people show up or 1. And my point behind this was to get that 1 increased. So again, that's why I said the other night, I don't know exactly what to say.
But I think this could help you zero in on it, because is it all bids or is it like a particular one? Maybe, I think that is maybe how some of the discussion goes, and maybe it's a discussion for here, and maybe it's a discussion, like you're saying, when a certain one comes up again, we know that's flagged as one that we want to try something different.
Well, it seems like we don't get, other than copier paper, it doesn't seem like, if I'm looking at the last 3 years, we don't get a real good turnout on
anything.
On anything.
So look at the front page,
Yes,
the
ma'am.
first paragraph. I did put just a couple things in there that may be affecting our bids. It's the last 3 lines in that first paragraph. The size or the scope of the project may be too small. So when I think about the Harder Middle School tennis courts, there's 6 courts and a couple basketball courts. I think about things like that where the project's just too small for larger people who are doing maybe more tennis courts. I don't know.
But I would think, just because you brought up tennis courts.
Yeah.
It seems like a standard amount of courts. It's not like you got a 30-court facility somewhere that they're all busy on. It's kind of standard.
So then, with that same one,
Yeah.
look at the next one, because that's the other piece of this. It's like a combination. It's a specialized product or service. I talked to Mark Payton about the tennis court one in particular. There are only about 3 or 4 companies that do that service.
Okay.
And so, it's a specialized product or service. When you're talking about the security one, I think you're up against that as well, where we're too small because we only need one person. We don't need a whole team of people securing it.
Yeah, but
Some other things that I've learned from, who would it be? The contractors for services. The prevailing wages in governments is a big deal. Because some of them who are not union shops have to pay prevailing wages when they come on our properties and do certain types of work. And so that might be a reason we don't get some vendors. And then the other thing, depending on what it is, like snow removal now, there are some small snow removal companies, but if they're not big enough to handle 6 different or 7 different locations, we may not pick them, and over time, they know that because they're not big enough to be able to do all of our thing. So that might be something where you split a bid, but we don't even get enough to split the bid for snow removal. So just depending on, I think Shauna's question is fair. Is there a particular one that we want to focus on? Because each one may have unique circumstances where we would want to identify something different that we could or should be doing in order to try to get more bidders. What I can tell you is that I agree with you. We need at least 3 to be at least somewhat fair. And so particularly on the fuel bid, where we only got 1 this year, I actually called the other vendor. So now if you look back, the past 2 years, we've only had 3 bidders, but 2 of those 3 merged into 1. So now there's only 2. So the one that was the other one standing, the second one, I actually reached out to him to say, what happened?
all right, let me,
Yep.
did we just mail out, for the fuel contract specifically, did 10 people call and say, I want a packet, or did you?
Remember the list that I told you I keep?
Yeah.
That list is old. We just keep adding to it, and so.
How often do you purge it?
Never.
Okay.
We just keep adding to it because we assume that they're in business. If we learn that they're not in business anymore, we'll cross them off. Like if an envelope comes back, and then you follow up on the web and they're not there, like the fuel vendor.
Yeah, and
They're
that's
the one that we had, they're no longer on the list because we know they're out of business. But otherwise, they stay on the list.
All right, so we had 9 vendors because 2 of them merged. Look at that fuel bid. What do we need to change specifically with the fuel bid so that we get more than 1 bid?
Sure. So when I called that other vendor, his concern or statement is that we don't own our tanks. One of the vendors owns them. And so that vendor was renting to the other vendor who has had the fuel bid the past few years. And so he said that if we owned our own tanks, that maybe he would bid because for a 1-year contract, just like Dr. Layden told you, he doesn't want to spend the money to put the tanks in for 1 year because it's expensive.
And since I don't even know the names, we're going to say Ford owns the tank and Chevy doesn't want to put their gas in Ford's tank.
Yes.
All right. So do we need to buy tanks so we can talk to Ford, Chevy, and Chrysler?
Let me do the math on that, and I didn't come prepared for that tonight.
I wasn't expecting you to.
But the fuel tanks alone are $25,000, give or take.
Yeah, but our
And
fuel
then,
bill is.
and then we have to maintain it. So, which I don't think is going to be a problem. I did ask Mark Payton, is this something your men can do? He thought that it could be. So right now, the company that owns the tanks, they also maintain the pumps and the tanks. They paint them, things like that. So let me find out more information for the board on this particular question of the cost-benefit analysis. How many gallons of fuel would it take based on a bid? And I've got a couple bids from before, the spread before you would make up the $25,000 difference in the number of gallons and kind of do the math on that. And perhaps that is a way where if we switched out and owned our own tanks, that we could get more bids. Here's what I can tell you. I don't know if that'll make a difference, but perhaps that's something that we should investigate and try.
Okay, and I guess that I don't know the answer to that question either. And they're also, I guess that's part of my frustration, is they're also specialized. Like there's 8 bids on a dishwasher, or 8 people that looked at a bid package for a dishwasher, we only get 1 bid. And I'm sure it's an entirely different set of circumstances as to, I guess I was hoping you had a magic pill for.
Should we say,
Where do we publish?
In the Elburn Herald, but,
Only the Elburn Herald? 'Cause
yes,
that could
but
pro-
it gets,
that could be part
it
of the
gets
problem.
picked up by the,
Why don't we do it on our website the same way like Joliet Junior College does, and we can advertise?
we can do that. You know
employment?
what, I do put them in the, on the website.
there's a spot.
There's a spot for bids on the website.
Or if
Yep.
King
And
County
then-
Chronicle, is
That
that who
is
you're talking
King
about?
County Chronicle, but
Okay.
the other thing is what I was trying to say is who it gets picked up by. There are companies out there that read all of the newspapers for bids, and then they, like a vendor, subscribes to that company. And then when that company sees a bid for that vendor, they're also pushing it out.
Oh, so like a company whose job it is to compile all the
Yeah,
bids.
there's 2 or
Yes.
3 of them out there.
Categories,
Yes.
and then
Right.
it's
So
a
we get
subscription
lots of
service.
calls from those people as well, tell us more about
Okay.
this bid. So, and I provide that, or we provide that information to those companies as
Okay.
well.
So this might not be worthwhile, but just random idea based on what you're saying. So before we do the bids next year, should we flag any bid that we got less than 3 previously and talk about? Having a memo, what we're gonna try different? I don't know, I'm just.
Or direct Dr. Fuchs to call a couple vendors to find out why they didn't bid, so we can maybe.
And maybe is the line, if we've gotten less, I mean, it's not all of them, if we've gotten less than 3 the last time we bid it? I don't know, it's nothing specific I'm thinking here, but.
Yeah, me either, I just.
Something to generate more interest
Yeah.
prior to.
To try something different on a few, and maybe you just do that for this year, because I mean, fuel will come up this year, and I don't know which else will, what's on the cycle, but so if we're doing something different for 2 this year, maybe, is that something we try, see if we have any luck with, and just, but make it targeted, I mean, we wouldn't do the ones that we got better responses.
Yeah, well, dishwashers come and gone, we don't need to.
And I can see where that one would be specialized, or just kind of one-off, but like something that's recurring, spend more, yeah.
And so if you look at FY19, we hit the target there except for the lawn care on all of the other ones.
Right.
If you look at FY18, we hit the target of 3 on all of them. In FY17, we had the same 2 security services. And this is probably the same 2 vendors on the tennis courts as we had this time, but everybody else, we hit the target. And then in FY16, well, the band uniforms, we didn't. And then the football scoreboard, we didn't. There's not too many vendors out there, and we knew which one we kind of wanted on that. But we had 2 bids, so that was good. 3 would have been better. I don't know that there was a 3rd company, though. I got to think about that.
No, it doesn't matter at this point,
Yeah.
it's moving
So
forward.
we've generally hit the target of 3, except for this year, where you've got a couple specialized products and services. Security hasn't changed. It's every 3 years. See, that's a long-term contract.
Yeah,
But it's,
I
but
don't
it,
know
yeah,
what the,
I know.
I don't know what the hesitation of companies are, I just.
So can we go directly to that? Because my question, you answered the question there at the end, I was gonna ask is whether there's it seems like Stone Age the way we were doing it, but then you answered it saying that there's companies that extract the bid processes and puts them in their website or what have you.
Well, like Reed is for construction, I don't know.
Can
what
we go
other-
directly to them instead of, that way we won't be missed? Maybe that's, not that,
I don't know. I think we can because they call all the time. But I think they also only cater to the trades and some of those. I'd have to check and see if they do like the security or the tennis court repairs. I'm not sure if that's under them. I feel like it's like the electricians, the general contractors.
It's a lot of, yeah,
I-
maybe the tennis courts, but mostly it's trades. Well, that's what I know, so there might be
Exactly.
other stuff for,
I feel like that's what it is when they call, because that's what they're looking for.
Because it sounds
Yeah.
such an antiquated way of doing it. I mean, with technology these days, it's just so.
School code doesn't allow you to, well, they allow you to accept bids electronically, but there's a whole lot of criteria that we would have to follow otherwise, that I don't know any school districts that are doing that. I can check into that. Again, they allow it, but I don't know anybody else who's doing it electronically. I mean, accepting the bids. They do post them, because we post them on our website.
Right.
So, and I don't disagree that it's not antiquated, but,
It just so like, whoa, I was just you reading it, there's, oh my God, this is like Stone Age.
well, school code
is.
requires us to follow, I mean,
From state?
Yeah.
Yes.
Really?
yeah,
Oh my
this
God.
information in
This
here,
isn't us.
this is required, step by step.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, those guys are like, maybe you should vote them out or something.
Or anything else with this one?
Stone Age, big time.
No, I'm good, thank you.
So, could I just add one thing? In February is when I generally bring that list. That would be the time that if there's something,
Yeah, but
but in the meantime, is the board directing me on the fuel when I just need further clarification on that?
I think the fuel is one that is the lowest hanging fruit, right? Is that of going, if we're gonna
Yeah.
pick one to look into more, start there?
Okay.
Yeah.
please.
I mean, it's also a really special circumstance with the tank.
Yeah, so
I
probably
mean,
might
so
take some
I
more
guess,
thought.
you know, in that case, I guess, yeah.
Well, I think the thing with the tank too is, as we talked about it, if we are gonna have the capital expenditure of a tank, then would it make more sense to do a 3-year to have more time to pay for the tank? But then the issue is with the 3-year, the gas prices can change, and the last time we did a 3-year, it ended up
Not in our favor?
not in our favor. So then you're kind of darned if you do, darned if you maybe do.
Yeah, but if we own the tank, we can do 1-year
Yes.
contracts in perpetuity.
Just takes longer to pay it off, but yes.
Yeah.
Would the existing vendor allow us to purchase their tank from them?
I can check.
Probably, then they don't have to move it. There's a cost with moving it and setting it up and.
Safety.
See what you figure out.
OSHA.
Thank you, Dr. Fuchs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So on some of this stuff, I'm just picking the scoreboard because you mentioned it. I know that the boosters and those guys went out to scored vendors, one or whatever it was, and then was it kind of like earmarked towards them as a, hey, the bid's coming up next week, so make sure you put your bid in type of thing?
No, and yes. I'm gonna go with no first and yes. The bid was fair, so at no point do I ever wanna say that the bid wasn't fair. But I can tell you, when you are looking for a unique product or service, you do go out to the various vendors and try to figure out what it is you want. And so by doing so, sometimes one vendor has a little bit more perceived advantage than another, but the way the bid specs are written, it is fair for all vendors.
Sure, publish in the right places.
Just to compare, so when we did the gym floor, we talked to one vendor and said, hey, we want this, that, and the other thing to write this spec, but then everybody bid on the same thing.
That's correct.
How does that work then for like band uniforms? Because you have to really work with the vendor to design them, because it's such a specialty product. And so then they've designed it, and then you send it out to bid, and I mean, I guess somebody could come back
And that's
in
why you
with-
only have one with that. There's only two vendors out there for band uniforms, if I remember correctly.
And then, and the other part of it is, how else will you do it?
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to,
Right.
I mean, you come back with a squirrel on it instead of.
Right.
I mean,
And then also sometimes too, there's a situation where if you go to a vendor and they help you write your specs and write the specs, and then if you end up the lowest responsible bidder is somebody else, then sometimes that vendor might feel used, and it's like, well, I'm gonna no longer be part of Kaneland, because I know that if they talk with me, I'm gonna help them, but then they're gonna go somewhere else. So sometimes people get burned by those kind of things, and I don't know how long their memory is or how much they need to
Or
the
vendors
gig.
may help you write the specs, but they might inadvertently make them so that they're more qualified.
Could,
Oftentimes, I have a second
That's the other way.
vendor or an expert
Yeah.
verify that they're written properly. So,
She's
If-
outsmarting you.
No,
no,
but that's-
it's true.
they might do that.
I've learned,
yeah, that happens.
I'm sure you have.
yeah.
Sure you have.
Because it's really important to me for this board that you have fair bids going out, and that's really important, so,
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
All right, so superintendent board report.
Yep, CAC met last week. Board Member Witt was our board representative there.
Thank you.
No, sure, no problem. You cover for me.
Last minute fill-in. Couple things that we talked about, and I'll let Teresa fill in after I give the overview, if she'd like to. Proficiency-based progress, which is something that the board will hear more about later. It went to CAC, and it's something that the board needs to hear more about later into the summer or fall as we start to pilot more grades doing it in more buildings. Then also one-to-one, since we did take one-to-one to CAC back in the fall. As far as what are your thoughts, how do we roll it out, what questions do you have, what do we need to provide, where do we need to meet and how often. So Mike came and gave updates on both of those. And the other big topic that this board has asked about, and CAC had the same conversation on last week, was the direction of committees, whether it's FAC, CAC, FPC. Those are the board advisory committees right now. So they wanted to have that same conversation too. So they had some thoughts and shared some things, and Board Member Witt, Teresa did a great job of providing from a board perspective, kind of the origination, how the genesis of some of the committees, how they came about, what they're doing, what the board may or may not be looking for. So that is a little bit of an overview. I can go into more detail, but I'll let, see if you want to share any more details.
Sure, yeah, a little bit. So, it's the age-old thing with our committees. They struggle with, why are we here? What do we do? Does the board listen to us at all? And I reassured them that we do listen, to their opinions, and we value them. There were some comments that made it, they want a guarantee that we're going to take their recommendations. And I tried to explain that the reason we can't do that is because people vote us in, and they have a remedy to vote us out if they don't like what we do. And if we delegate those things to committees that aren't elected, then the voters don't have that remedy. So, and most of the people are like, hey, as long as I know you guys are listening and everything, but they also talked about wanting follow-up sometimes. And it's, I tried to say, well, if you watch the video of the board meeting, you'll hear why. Because they wanted to know, like, well, if they don't take our recommendations, why or why not? And we'd like to have that come back to us. But in my opinion, maybe others feel differently, but my opinion is that they can look it up on the video.
Right.
So, I don't think we really came to any kind of a resolution. I mean, there was I thought a good idea of them. Kelly Vose, the chair, brought up, maybe that they would want to be like more of a communications piece, group to get the word out on things. And, I don't remember extensive discussion on that. I think that, that was part of the original, the original idea was for them to get.
They talked about the frequency of meeting, locations of meetings, not having it being an official committee, but more of like a parent university piece where it's open-ended and more people can come. But then there was the thought of, well, maybe there's not enough ownership and then nobody will come. And Teresa also did a real nice job of just sharing the overview from our board election of the interest that was there, which was minimal. The committees in general, the feedback was, one person applied for CAC out of all of our committees, out of our entire community. The parent turnout, a couple of other things too. So Teresa shared that information, and maybe it needs to look different. Maybe it could be different. People talked about the technology piece. Is there a Skype function? Then people felt detached and no. So I think as we bring this conversation in greater depth, not what we did last week, but the topic of committees, is we bring it to the board, we can share some of those ideas on what it might look like to a greater extent, and then go back to talk to the different committees in the fall, because they're board committees, and if you look closely at the CAC bylaws, there's supposed to be somebody from CAC at every meeting here, sharing information, and then they're supposed to be the feedback loop, but it becomes problematic that there's sometimes, or most of the time, 2 board meetings per month, where there's only one CAC, and it's not every month, so that direct feedback can't always take place in a timely manner. So whether or not it stays an advisory board, or if it becomes, and I've shared the idea of something as far as administrative feedback board, or a parent loop that way, because I think what happens a number of times when we do get their feedback, it's on the handbook, it's on summer school timing, it's on courses, it's on a number of topics, but we take it administratively from there, and then we make a recommendation to the board. So it's bits and pieces of what they say. It's generally not as much of an all-in on a complete topic as maybe FAC might be at times with fees or something. So that said, we talked about what it looks like more is we take it, we cull it a little bit, and maybe some of their ideas are used, and that's where the feedback piece that Teresa shared, it's too hard, because I usually write down 15 or 20 topics or 15 or 20 items or notes per topic, and we go back and we shift and we adjust some of those. We change different things, but it's hard to go back to CAC and say, well, here are the 16 ideas you gave. We used 3 of them or 5 of them or 4 of them. So we just need to look to see what that might look like, so that it's beneficial for their time and it's beneficial for administration and the board. So it might need to look something different.
And a lot of the times the comments, while it's probably 50-50, and they bring up personal anecdotes to get the point across. Well, some of them are really just personal things they want to get answered about their own child. And I think a lot of people use the committee for that, that purpose. And sometimes that is a good thing, because then you can say, oh, well, there's a problem here, based on your experience, maybe we should see if others are having that experience. But sometimes it's just so individualized that it's not something that you can broaden.
So that'll be part of a bigger conversation. Next one is the foundation. Foundation met 2 weeks ago, and as you heard in the salutes, very generous in the donation for the Chromebook covers. And then also, if you recall, last spring we did the first staff appreciation fundraiser through the foundation. We are continuing it this year, just a little bit different. Last year we did a certificate with balloons, and the balloons were, frankly, a nightmare. Blowing those up, trying to get those delivered. They were in cars. I'm driving down 47, balloons all over it was just a nightmare. So based on necessity, like the mother of all invention kind of thing, we're going to do candy bars instead. So when you see the flyers, candy bars will be much easier to tape onto a certificate, put that in a mailbox rather than balloons. So the foundation is excited to try to do the fundraiser again. It is open. Already did our first round of PR through Jen Hodak and Facebook and Twitter. It's on the website. We'll continue to do more of it. We just will never, ever do balloons again.
I like balloons.
No,
I think everyone likes balloons.
I think we should put that up for a vote.
No, we will not. That will not go to a vote. That will be unilaterally denied. And so the other, but that aside, hopefully that goes well. And also, the balloons with the expense of the helium and the actual balloons and the number of balloons that didn't work very well. It was not really. No, I'm just saying it wasn't a great fundraiser. It just, candy bars will be $8 out of 10 we can make, as opposed to the balloons were about $5.50. So part of it's financial and some of it is, I'm not driving balloons around. It's both of those things. And then on a more of a serious note, the foundation, as we have a new leadership in there, some questions on the foundation and being a 501c3 and how the belief that it should be operated more like a true 501c3, which would be like a sports boosters, performing arts boosters, PTAs, PTOs, PTNs, those groups, which we haven't been, and we haven't been doing for a number of reasons. Number one, the foundation membership has vacillated quite a bit, and there was a time when it was Cheryl, Julianne, and I trying to hang on to it with like maybe 2 or 3 other people. But one of the conversations was, if it is truly a 501c3, which it is, and we have bylaws, the bylaws need to be changed a little bit, how do we transition from Beth doing a lot of the work, who shouldn't be, as a taxpayer and a Kaneland employee, and Julianne and I being on the committee as reserved members as opposed to ex officio members? How do we do that transition without losing the intimate feel of it? So that's something that you'll see and hear coming up in the future too, about what that transition can look like. And President Sparber was at that one, so I'll let you share any more thoughts or anything that I've missed from that conversation.
No, I think that's accurate, and I think the concern is, not just losing like the intimate feel, but maybe losing the whole thing. You know, that if you lose sort of a core driving force, will it be able to sort of kind of stand on its own 2 feet? Part of it being because they don't really have, as Cheryl said, they don't really have a built-in group that will just automatically sort of flock to it, like maybe in certain schools, PTN, where they sort of have all those parents for those certain years. So how to kind of keep it going in that way. But it's something that they're taking on kind of through a bylaw discussion, and having a variety of people, I think, signed up to talk about the bylaws, which maybe is someone who's been on the group for a while, someone who's sort of new and who's sort of trying to have a new look for them or decide a new direction. But that's something that won't necessarily come back through the board, because as opposed to like the CAC's bylaws that we would approve, the foundations we don't. So we'll just hear about it.
Would we maybe need to change procedures, like of how they get the wish list or whatever they get to choose from, when they do the teacher grants?
Possibly. I mean, they had talked about how like a lot of that information is helpful, like to hear. Sometimes I think like Dr. Mum and Mr. Rice might comment on what would really be helpful. That there is sort of that dialogue. So I think they'd want to still find that some way, but it probably would change the process.
Kind of like what the boosters do is they go through the band and choir director and Mr. Rollman, he goes in and he'll share some of those concerns as the advisor to them or the ex officio member.
Are we on to topics?
Not yet.
Oh, sorry, because you had led me into, how many different 503s do we have that are supporting the district, and do we have a standardized policy for how we interface with all of them?
Does sound like it could be a topic for future agenda when we.
I don't know that they're all that varied, though,
No.
because it's like the schools and then only a couple others besides with
I
like
count about
performing
8.
arts. Pardon me?
I count about 8. There's 4 elementaries, the middle school, PTO, the foundation,
Special
sports,
needs.
and performing arts.
Isn't there a special needs?
Oh, special needs.
Yep. And their charge is more complying with federal regulations than ours, so.
But, I'm sorry, I didn't mean, I guess we're off on it. Anyway, but we should have a standardized method for them to interface with the district. I mean, the sports boosters should be treated relatively the same as the special needs PTN group at the Stewart. There should be a consistency to how we deal with all of them. Or a policy that says, because we can't control them, they're 503s, so
we can
not
help
part
guide,
of the district.
we can help guide what they're doing and how
So
they
you
interface.
have some meetings to interact with them in total,
Right.
but I don't know if we want more than that, or.
I honestly don't know what that is, so I guess I'd want to know more about it.
We'll see if that comes up in a minute. No, seriously, we'll see if that comes up.
We'll see if you say that again. Yeah.
2 other things quickly. Educator of the Year is this Friday. It's an annual event. I think it's the 20th or so that the King County Regional Office of Education puts on. Teachers are nominated within the district. They're identified in December, and then they build notebooks and folders for each of them. Board members are welcome to come. The ticket time has ended for this spring, but board members are welcome to come in the future if you would ever like to. Just as a reminder, our staff that are recognized for this year, our classroom elementary teacher is Christy Purnell from John Stewart. Our classroom middle school educator is Mr. Hewells here from Harder. Classroom high school educator is Sandy Filetto. Early career educator is Cindy Campisi, here also from Harder. student support personnel is Stephanie Unger from KBK, and our educational service personnel is Sue Sensor, also from KBK. And that, again, is Friday night. It's a nice turnout, and the tickets do come through Beth, and we did verify that this year, I believe, might be one of our largest years of staff coming to support their peers. So it's really good, a good turnout. It's well over 100, which we get our 100 tickets, but then we had to ask for more. So there are some times when we've returned tickets under 100, so it should be a good Kaneland turnout. Then the last thing I have is Wednesday night, here at Harder, we continue our KEA negotiations from 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock with our 3 board reps.
Dr. Fuchs?
I just have one. We did receive our second quarter categorical payment. So that's the payment from December at about $1 million from the state. So now we're just awaiting our March payment, and then there'll be another one for June. So that second quarter, the second payment for this year, that's the third payment we received this year, because the first one was the last one from last year. So I'll keep you posted.
The typical timing,
Thank you.
Typical for the state.
except for that last one.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Yeah. Topics for future agendas?
I got nothing.
All right, good. Moving on. He said he has nothing.
Balloons.
Do I really need to reiterate it, or?
Well, you need to at least vote. So do you want us to know how we interact with?
Maybe
the
a review,
501(c)(3)s?
or, I think I want more than a weekly update on that particular topic. I'd like it to be a board topic.
I'm good with it. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm
okay.
different.
I think it should be something, connection, somehow, shape or form.
It'd be informative
I see
anyway.
Ryan and Teresa so far.
Well, we all
I
do.
don't care the way, yeah, the way it doesn't.
Good, okay, we got him.
Sorry.
Anything else besides Ryan, because we're shutting him down?
He only gets one.
Yes, you did, that's all right. He's not listening, so it won't matter.
Public comments? Nope, seeing none. All right, so we have,
Closed session?
yep, executive session tonight. The Board of Education is scheduled for executive session where there will be no action taken following the session. Therefore, afterwards, the vote to go into closed session, the recording of tonight's meeting will be concluded. Tonight, we are going into an executive session for the collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees. Is there a motion to go into executive session? And a second? And a roll call?
Mrs. Pavlik?
Aye.
Mr. Rivas?
Aye.
Mrs. Sparber?
Aye.
Mrs. Witt?
Aye.
Mrs. Junk? Mr. Carey?
Aye.
And Mr. Lawler?
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.